What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to sit down and do another full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos I did in the past and combine them together into one big video. Today's full story video is going to be about Captain America, but over in the Heroes Reborn reality. Let me explain. You see, when it came to Marvel Comics in the late 1990s, what they did was they had some properties that were no longer selling. And so you had Marvel cancel those books and push those books into a separate reality, better known as Heroes Reborn. And so when it came to Heroes Reborn, you had Marvel bring back old creators to work on these characters and give them a fresh start in a brand new reality. But also was hoping that it would bring back fans back in the comics in the late 1990s as well. And so when it came to Captain America, well, that assignment went over to Rob Liefeld. And so it was up to him to kind of work on Steve Rogers, give him a new origin story, but to also kind of like do some new things with the character as well. Now, technically, when it came to Rob, he got fired halfway through the 12-issue run, but it was him kind of basically putting the work first when it came to Steve Rogers being in that Heroes Reborn reality. Okay, so man, we have now officially reached that point where we're going to sit down and talk about Heroes Reborn. Like when it came to our coverage over the X-Men, I kind of always wondered like, would I actually sit down and cover Heroes Reborn? Because we had to cover X-Men Onslaught. And while we were covering that event, I kind of realized we should just go ahead and cover Heroes Reborn. It won't take us that long because each of the series in that reality only had about 12 issues each. Then you had a mini series to kind of wrap everything up and bring those heroes back into the main Marvel universe. Now, as we all know, when it comes to Heroes Reborn, it was kind of like this fresh start for Marvel Comics. And the reason why, because in the late 1990s, for Marvel, a lot of their stuff were no longer selling. You know, Spider-Man, the X-Men, they were doing good. But for the Avengers, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Captain America, those characters right there were no longer selling like they used to in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And so for Marvel, they said, okay, cool, you know what? We gotta get things back on track. And so what they did was, when it came to X-Men Onslaught, you had those characters, the Avengers, Fantastic Four, and the Inhumans, run into Onslaught into a different reality, better known as Heroes Reborn. With this brand new reality, these characters now get a fresh start, a new beginning in this brand new reality. Now, unfortunately, we didn't learn the full secret about this new reality until the very end of Heroes Reborn when it comes to Franklin Richards. And so early on, all we know is that this is a brand new beginning. Like, here we go. And so the first story we're going to sit down and actually talk about is going to be Captain America. Now, here's the thing, because this is done by Rob Liefeld, Jeff Loeb, and a tad bit of help from Chuck Dixon as well. And we kind of get into the opening pages of the storyline. And what we're kind of given here is that this is Steve Rogers at the moment kind of having this dream or nightmare to him where he's back in World War II and he is Captain America. But here's the thing, because when we do kind of reach the ending part of this section and we go into the present day, we see him waking up and beginning to freak out. And we're kind of wondering like, okay, why in the world is he freaking out for? Well, we see here that for Steve Rogers, he has no idea why in the world he was having that dream or nightmare. It's kind of like he has no idea that he was Captain America back in World War II. And so right now it's him wondering like, should he tell his wife about this nightmare? Now that right there is kind of a new start for Steve Rogers, because in this reality, he has a wife, and not just a wife. Like, he also has a son. His wife's name is Peggy and his son's name is Rick. So it's kind of like, okay, cool. This is Steve Rogers as a family man. But now we're kind of left to wonder, how in the world did we get to this point right here where it's Steve Rogers being a family man? But at the same time, how can Steve Rogers not remember that he was Captain America? Like, how in the world we got from point A to point B? But the problem is that we don't get the chance to learn what's truly going on here, because you didn't have Nathan stop by, his friend, and you have Nathan pick up Steve and then go off to work. Now, here's the thing, because we do learn that for Steve and Nathan, really Steve's family, they live in Philadelphia, right? Now, we also see Steve and Nathan listening to the radio. And this is where we learn about the World Party. Now, the World Party is apparently this group of Nazis who go on the nation and everything. And every single time they stop at some city, things always pop off. Now, their main goal is to recruit people to their cause. But either way, they now arrived in Philadelphia. Now, while you have Nathan and Steve heading off to work, really when they get to work, they pass this black guy who says Captain, like he knows Steve Rogers. And for Steve, he's wondering, who the heck is that guy right there? But while you have Steve on his lunch break, he begins to tell his friends about his nightmare. Now, for Nathan, he is quickly to just excuse himself and walk over to a phone to call somebody else. And apparently that person he's calling will love information that he has about Steve Rogers and the dreams that Steve has been having. Now, that is when we do jump over to Steve Rogers, who's at home again, and he falls asleep while watching TV. Now, while he's asleep watching TV, he begins to have that dream again, where it's him being Captain America, fighting in World War II. And so when he wakes up, he's kind of wondering, like, okay, why in the world do I keep having the same dream over and over and over again? Like, he wants to tell his wife Peggy about this dream. The problem is that he's afraid to tell her. But that is when we're introduced to Rebecca Barnes. Now, Rebecca Barnes is the daughter to Richard Barnes and Peggy Barnes. Of course, two people who had close ties to Steve Rogers back in World War II. Now, for Rebecca, she's not the only child. You also have John there as well. But for John and his friend Lunk, these two characters are going to the next World Party event to see if they have the ability to join the World Party group. Now, for Rebecca, she hates the idea of her brother possibly joining a Nazi group, but of course, he does ignore her. Now, when it comes to Rebecca, as you already can tell, she will most likely become the next Bucky Barnes or Bucky for Steve Rogers in this reality. Now, we also jump over to one of the two villains of this storyline. One of them is known as Master Man. Now, for Master Man, he was the Nazi super soldier. So back in World War II, Steve Rogers was not the only one given the super soldier serum. So was Master Man here as well, but of course, working for the wrong side. Now, as we see here, he's still kind of upset with the fact that they lost the war. But now their main goal is to use the World Party organization that they have put together to bring in a whole brand new Holocaust, a whole brand new world in their image. So, of course, he is the leader of the World Party. But technically not the actual leader. There's somebody else behind the scenes who does control the entire organization. While you have Master Man at the next World Party event, getting more people to join his cause, we see an undercover SHIELD agent there, better known as Agent Hunt. Now, unfortunately for Hunt, he is not going to be around that much long for us to care for him. And the reason why, because as he does look around the church, he finds this underground base that the World Party is currently using. And we see him find these nukes. And so, of course, he begins to freak out and wants to warn his higher-ups. Unfortunately, he's then taken out from behind. Now, for Steve Rogers, it's him kind of like, okay, why in the world do I keep having the same dream over and over again? But that is when he's then confronted by that black guy from earlier who said, hey, you're captain. Like, he knew that Steve Rogers was Captain America. And so now we learn his name is Abraham Wilson. Now, for Wilson, his main goal right now is to tell Steve Rogers, like, you are Captain America. You fought in World War II. Now, for Steve, he can't believe that. He's like, wait a second, hold on. World War II happened a long time ago. And also, I was never a soldier. But it's him saying, like, let me show you proof. Let me go ahead and show you the actual truth here that you are Captain America. Now, it's also Wilson telling us, and this right here is somewhat important, it's Wilson telling us that he has been trying his best to find Steve Rogers for years and years and years. But the problem was that every single time he believed that he was getting close to finding Steve Rogers, well, unfortunately, the trail would go cold. And so he could never find Steve Rogers until now. Now, you do have Wilson take Steve over to this building. And of course, he pulls out the shield. Now, here's the thing. For Master Man, he also wants the shield as well. But either way, this is Wilson saying, like, this right here should hopefully jog your mind to help you remember the man you used to be. Now, here's the thing, though, because while you have the two characters talking to one another, well, the entire building they're in blows up. And the reason why, because the World Party had sent some soldiers of theirs to go get the shield, but to also bring Steve Rogers. So, of course, this leads into a battle where it's Steve Rogers beginning to remember how to be Captain America, remembering that he was Captain America and being able to fight against all these different guys all at once. Now, here's the thing, because as the battle goes on and you do have Steve being able to take them all down, he then goes to check in on Mr. Wilson. Now, with the death of Mr. Wilson here, it's going to put Steve Rogers on the right path again. Like, okay, listen, you are now Captain America. You got to go back out there and bring down your enemies. But it's also Mr. Wilson saying, like, listen, if they knew about me, if they knew you were here, they knew about your shield being here, then most likely they know about your family. They know about your son, like your wife. You gotta go. And so for Steve Rogers, his main goal now is to avenge the death of Mr. Wilson. And all of this does take place in the first chapter, because now we pick up with S.H.I.E.L.D. on the helicarrier. And we pick up with Sharon Carter and Dum Dum Dugan. Now, this is Sharon Carter informing Nick Fury, like, hey, we got a problem. Steve Rogers is now beginning to remember that he was Captain America. And so for Nick Fury, he's kind of like, that is the problem. You know what? It's time for us to find him and make sure that he does work for us on our terms this time. And so that wraps up the first chapter of the storyline. And so that kind of leads us into the second chapter of the storyline. Now, when it comes to the second chapter of the storyline, we're picking up with Steve Rogers just rushing back home. He's all, okay, you know what? I gotta go check in on my family. Because when it came to Wilson, he told him, like, if they know about you being Captain America, then most likely they know about your wife and they know about your son. Except when Steve gets back home, they're just frozen. They're not moving, they're not talking, they're not blinking, nothing at all, not even breathing. But that is when you have Steve Rogers be confronted by Nick Fury. Now, when it comes to Nick Fury, it's kind of like just fast information thrown at Steve Rogers to hopefully jog his memory. Because it's Nick saying, like, hey, Steve, listen, I have known you ever since you were Captain America. But the thing is, you stepped away from your role as Captain America. We had no choice, me nor the president. Now, for Steve Rogers right now, he's kind of listening, but at the same time, he's worried about his wife and his son. And this right here is just tragic, because you have Steve Rogers learn here that Peggy and his son were never real at all. That, matter of fact, they're life model decoys. They're just robots. And so it's Nick saying, like, you never had a wife. You never had a son. We have been doing this to you over and over again. And so it's Steve kind of wondering, like, why in the world would you guys keep doing this to me? Like, what in the world happened in the past? Now, before we are able to learn exactly like what happened in the past, we jump over to Rebecca Barnes. And so for Rebecca Barnes, it's her waking up and seeing her brother officially leaving the family home to go join the world party. Now, of course, you do have Rebecca trying her best to stop her brother, but unfortunately, he's not going to stop at all. Now, for John, he's not really a major player in this storyline, but I still want to be like, hey, here's John. We saw him earlier. And here he is now. He's part of the world party. He does play a somewhat small role in the overall story. Now, this is where we do learn that for Mr. Wilson, he had a son, and his son is no other than Sam Wilson. So, of course, we're now beginning the process of bringing in Falcon into the world of Heroes Reborn. But it's also Sam being informed like your father is dead. So it's now time for you to head over to S.H.I.E.L.D. at the moment. And so now it's Sam being pulled into the world of Captain America. Now, the very end of this chapter is really more of us finding out like, hey, listen, Master Man is not the person in charge of the entire World Party organization. That instead is someone else. It's the Red Skull. So the Red Skull is still alive, and his main goal is to bring the Nazi organization back into the picture once again. And so he's the one in charge of the World Party. Now, when it comes to the third chapter of the storyline, it does kind of pick up where we do learn what happened in the past to Steve Rogers. You see, when it came to Steve, he was meeting up with President Truman. Now, when it came to Truman, he had just basically bombed Japan. So we're at the very end of World War II. And Steve finding out's kind of like, wait a second, y'all dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. Like, have y'all lost your mind? Y'all killed off a lot of innocent people. But it's kind of like Steve saying, you have the right for freedom of speech. You have the right to find a way to end this horrible war. But the thing is, I can't stand beside you when it comes to the idea of bombing Japan like that because you killed off so many innocent people. Now, for Truman, he knows if he tells the public, you're going to have a few people very upset about the fact that, hey, America had just bombed Japan. And so he wanted Steve to stand beside him as he told the public, as a way to say, like, Steve is agreeing with the fact that what they did was the right thing to do. Now, for Steve, it's a hex no. He's like, there's no way I can stand beside you as you tell the public what you did to Japan. So Steve leaves. Now, right after that, you then have Truman realize it would be a bad idea to have an angry Steve Rogers, an angry Captain America out there in the public. So they're wondering, how can they control him? And so you had Truman as General Ross. Now Ross says, you know what? I know a guy who can help us out, and introduces a young Nick Fury. At that point right there, S.H.I.E.L.D. had just begun. But it's Nick saying that he knows a way to control Steve Rogers. Now, for me personally, the next part of the storyline does kind of bother me a tad bit here. And here's the reason why, because when we jump back over to Steve Rogers and Nick Fury in the present day, it's Nick telling Steve Rogers everything. Like, hey, listen, so what I just told you, that was part one. Part two was that we found these hidden plans left behind by Hitler to basically have like sleeper agents across the world. And so we say, you know what? Let's go ahead and do the same thing to Steve Rogers. Basically, play with his mind. And so they have been doing that ever since World War II. And so for Steve's kind of like, so basically, for a good while there, what I believed in, a wife, a kid, a job, a happy family, was basically a lie because y'all were mad at me for not wanting to stand with you guys. And so it's Nick saying like, dude, times were different. We had no choice. But now you do have a choice. And so it's Steve kind of agreeing to go ahead and work with Nick Fury and go ahead and head over to the helicarrier. Now, for me personally, I'm kind of like, that part right there seems a tad bit weird. Like how quickly Steve was able to just move on and be like, you know what? It's time for me to get back to work. Now, once you do have Steve Rogers and also Nick Fury arrive in the helicarrier, it's now Steve being introduced to, Sharon Carter and also Dum Dum Dugan. Now, here's the thing, because it's also Steve being able to get back his good old Captain America outfit. So just like that, we got our hero back on the board. But here's the thing, because you didn't have Nick saying, hey, listen, Steve, it's time for me to introduce you to the Avengers. Now, we don't really get the chance to see the Avengers in this book at all. It's him saying, like, I want you to meet them, and that's really it. We move on to the next section. But now we have to jump back over to Red Skull, Master Man, and of course, the rest of the World Party. Now, for the Red Skull, he's kind of upset about the fact that Master Man had woken up Steve Rogers, because kind of like, you woke up the man, and now we have to handle the man in some type of way. Now, for Master Man, he wanted the one to actually handle Steve Rogers, because they both are basically super soldiers. But his Red Skull saying, no, not going to happen. Matter of fact, I want to use somebody else who can definitely bring down Steve Rogers. And that would be Crossbones. So just like that, another character being brought into the Heroes Reborn universe. But that's when we do jump over to Steve Rogers having a conversation with, Sam Wilson. So this right here is the first time these two characters are meeting one another. Here's the problem though. Sam hates Steve Rogers because when it came to Sam's father, Mr. Wilson, he was never around. He was always just traveling around the world over and over and over again, looking for Steve Rogers. He's like, hey, listen, I gotta find Steve Rogers. I have no choice but to give his shield back over to him. And so for Sam, it was kind of like not having a father around. But at the same time, his dad was around. All he heard was Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers this, Steve Rogers that. And that was really it. Now, while you do have the two characters talking to one another, in a matter of like 2 pages, you didn't have Crossbones appear. Now, when he does appear, he easily takes down Steve Rogers just like that. And so at the end of the 3rd chapter, we see the World Party being able to grab Steve and also Sam, and now they're both their prisoners. Now, as we dive into the 4th chapter, we're kind of picking up with Rebecca Barnes once again. Now, for Rebecca, she had just broke into the World Party base. And the reason why, because she wants to find her brother John and try to bring him back over to the side of good. But here's the thing, because she overhears the World Party was able to, grab Steve Rogers and also Sam Wilson. Now, she does find her brother and his best friend. The problem is that they are now fully on the side of the World Party. They agree with everything the World Party wants to do. And so she does try her best to get away because her brother does want to kill her off. Now, while she does try to get away, unfortunately, she runs into the Red Skull. Now, the middle part of this chapter is really more the Red Skull just trying to bring Steve Rogers over to his side. It's him basically saying, like, look at your country. Like, the whole idea of the melting pot is ridiculous. Like, your country is basically falling apart. And matter of fact, when it came to Master Man and the World Party, what Master Man said was that you have all these other cultures hurting one particular race of people, taking everything away from them, jobs and other types of stuff. And so when it came to the Red Skull, he's kind of like, look at your country. You allowed all these other cultures into your country, and now the people, the Caucasian people, don't have the ability to live anymore like they should. They should be the master race. And so you have Red Skull saying, like, Steve, I know if I pull off your mask, I'm going to see a blonde boy, a blonde man. So why not go ahead and join our side? But for Steve, it's like, heck no, because in his mindset, no matter what race you are, no matter what religion you are, everyone is equal. And so you didn't have Steve break free and begin to fight against the Red Skull. Now, for me, the next section is kind of cool here because you do have Crossbones try his best to protect the Red Skull. But let's not forget that earlier Crossbones did defeat Steve Rogers, but only because he caught Steve off guard. Well, here we are right now. Steve is not caught off guard. And so you have Steve being able to easily bring down Crossbones and the Red Skull. But right after that, you didn't have Steve Rogers and Falcon be confronted by Masterman. Now, with Masterman being there, he's kind of like, hey, you know what? It's good to see you, Steve Rogers, but listen, I got to take you down. Now, before you have Steve fight against Masterman, you also have Masterman tell Steve and Sam that it was him who had blew up that building that Steve and Sam's father was in earlier in the storyline. So basically, it's Sam finding out how his father died, like who was responsible. And so you have Sam Wilson wanting to fight against, well, Masterman. But unfortunately, he gets shot down, just like that. Like, bam, 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 he's shot down. And we're kind of left to believe the possibility that Sam Wilson is going to die. Close on the 4th chapter of the storyline, we do pick up with Rebecca Barnes. Now, this is Rebecca waking up and realizing that she's been tied down by her brother and his friend. But currently, she's tied to nuclear missiles. And so, of course, she begins to freak out. And so as we get into the 5th and final chapter, we're picking up with Nick Fury, right? It's Nick Fury bringing S.H.I.E.L.D. over to the base of where the World Party is at. So it's Nick saying like, hey, you know what? Let's find our guy and let's go ahead and bring down the World Party here and now. But now we switch over to Steve Rogers. Now for Steve, it's really him just fighting against the Red Skull and Masterman. And you have the Red Skull realize he has to dip out. There's no way that he'll be able to handle someone like Steve Rogers. Now, Masterman could possibly handle him, but for Steve, he just gets the upper hand and he is able to easily defeat the Masterman just like that. And so when it comes to Sam Wilson, it does seem like he is going to die, except what you have Steve do is give Sam Wilson part of his blood, because in his blood is the super soldier serum. So is Steve kind of hoping that the serum will be able to save the life of Sam Wilson and to, you know, allow him to be a hero possibly down the road as well. And the book really does kind of wrap up very quickly here. Like, man, they were trying their best to go ahead and move on to the next storyline here, because you do have Red Skull being able to get away. But when it comes to Masterman here, he does find, you know, John, his friend, and also Rebecca. And his main goal is to go ahead and launch the nuclear missiles. Now, you do have Steve arrive and being able to free Rebecca, but to also continue to battle against Masterman. Now, while their battle continues on, you also have Sam Wilson appear as well. Now, with Sam being there, just like that, we get our confirmation that Sam does have the super soldier serum, that he will survive. And so the final strike is Steve and Sam working together to deliver, had a hard time saying that, to deliver a punch on Masterman to officially take him out. Now, with them doing that, S.H.I.E.L.D. now has the ability to move in. And so the very last page of the storyline, it's really more Sam, Steve, and Nick kind of wanting to work together. And you also have, I guess, Rebecca going to be in that Bucky role. Now, here's the thing. The next issue is supposedly going to involve Cable. And that right there is kind of intriguing to me, because for Cable, it seems like we now have a new counterpart for him in this reality. But with okay, so it's time for us to kind of sit down and actually cover, well, the first ever crossover for the Heroes Reborn reality, better known as the Industrial Revolution. Now, this is technically a 4-part storyline, but not really. It's kind of weird because all the 6 issues of all the different books were technically used as a way to tell this huge crossover between all the different titles. Now, just in case we have anybody joining us when it comes to our coverage over Heroes Reborn, let me explain what Heroes Reborn was all about. You see, the late 1990s for Marvel Comics, they had some books that were no longer selling. So, for example, Avengers, Fantastic Four, Iron Man also, well, technically, when it comes to Captain America, he was selling, but he was also part of that deal as well when it came to Marvel canceling all their books that were supposedly not selling and giving those characters a fresh start in a brand new reality, better known as Heroes Reborn. And you had Marvel go out of their way to bring back old creators to see if that would get fans back into their books once again. So like Jim Lee, for example. Now, when it came to the Industrial Revolution, this first crossover, it did take place in all the 6 issues of all the different books that were part of Heroes Reborn. So Avengers, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and of course Captain America as well. But here's the thing. Most of the actual crossover takes place in Avengers and Iron Man. When it comes to Fantastic Four and, well, good old Steve Rogers, yes, their books are still part of the crossover, but technically not? It's really weird. Let me explain as we dive into Fantastic Four issue number 6. Because Fantastic Four issue number 6 is actually the conclusion to our last video for this series, but also the prologue for the actual crossover. But in the last few pages is the actual crossover. You'll see what I mean here, because as we get into the opening page of the storyline, we pick up with Alicia Masters. Now, for Alicia Masters, by this point in the timeline for Heroes Reborn, she just met Ben Grimm, like literally just met him, and has been trying to have a date with the guy. The problem is right now he's late. And the reason why, because, well, currently the Fantastic Four are in Latveria dealing with Dr. Doom, but also the Super Skrull. And this kind of required us to kind of give you guys a quick rundown about what exactly happened in the earlier issues leading up to this particular moment. Let me explain. So in the earlier issues, as we all know, for Fantastic Four, they got their powers by being hit with cosmic radiation. But here's the reason why they were hit with cosmic radiation. You see, when it came to our heroes, really Reed Richards, he was working on a project where the spacecraft was going to be used to study an anomaly out in space. The problem was that out of nowhere, Wyatt Wingfoot, who worked for S.H.I.E.L.D., just took over the entire project. And the reason why, because apparently S.H.I.E.L.D. and the president agreed to go ahead and destroy the anomaly. Now, technically, when it came to Wyatt Wingfoot, he was working for S.H.I.E.L.D., but that was not the real Wyatt Wingfoot. But at that time, we had no idea. All we knew was that he was working for S.H.I.E.L.D., but also working for Dr. Doom. Now, for our heroes, they used a prototype spacecraft to follow Wyatt's men into space to stop them, but of course they failed, but also got hit with cosmic radiation. Now, that space anomaly, it had crashed on Earth in Wakanda. That was the Silver Surfer. Now, you did have Dr. Doom go out of his way to catch the Silver Surfer so that he'll then be able to absorb that energy and give it to himself. But when it came to Wyatt Wingfoot, the fake Wyatt Wingfoot, we had learned that he was a Super Skrull working behind the scenes who also wanted to absorb the energy of the Silver Surfer for himself. And so we're technically all the way caught up now. And the thing is, none of this does anything for the actual crossover that we have to talk about. So don't worry, I put a timestamp down below to tell you where to jump to if you're trying to get into the actual crossover. But this kind of leads into us getting the reason why the Super Skrull is here for. Like, what is his actual purpose on Earth? Well, the reason why, because when it came to the Super Skrull, as we all know, he's part of the Skrull race. But at this point, their home world has been attacked by, well, Galactus. And so it's the Super Skrull kind of warning our heroes all like, hey, you found the Silver Surfer, but you have no idea why he's technically here for, because he's right now trying to find a world for his master Galactus to, well, absorb. And so it's our heroes kind of learning about the Skrull race, but also learning about Silver Surfer and Galactus as well, all in one. Now, with the Super Skrull having the powers of Cosmic inside of him, he now has the ability to fight against all our heroes, but also Doctor Doom as well. As a matter of fact, we get that classic throwback to how the Super Skrull is able to use the different powers of the different members of the Fantastic Four as well. But this kind of leads into a very quick ending, and the reason why, because we got to get into that crossover, right? So we do pick up with Doctor Doom. The man got a plan. So you have Doctor Doom inform Susan to use her powers to redirect the energy that Super Skrull is shooting out at the moment over to the Silver Surfer. With him doing that, bam, just like that, Surfer is back on his feet again, getting ready to battle against the Super Skrull. But here's the problem though. You see, as their battle goes on, the reactor underneath Victor's castle is about to, well, explode, it seems like. And so for our heroes, they have to escape. Now for Doctor Doom, he does not want to leave. So he goes down to where the reactor is at to kind of save it, but also gather other things as well. For the rest of our heroes, like the Fantastic Four and Black Panther, they get the heck out of there while you have Silver Surfer and the Super Skrull continue to battle against one another. And so this kind of leads into our heroes heading back home, but technically because for Ben Grimm, he got word about what happened on Avengers Island. So this right here kind of begins the process of the Fantastic Four being brought into the crossover, but also what we saw in our last video for the Avengers. Now for our heroes, they're also kind of wondering, like, did Doctor Doom survive? Now, as they fly away, we do see our heroes being watched by the Silver Surfer. So of course it's kind of like, hey guys, don't worry, he's not gone just yet. He might play a role down the road in a later storyline for our heroes. Now, a little bit after that moment right there, we do pick up with Doctor Doom, but like in a different lab away from the castle that got blown up just recently. And so for Doctor Doom, while being in his lab, he's then confronted by one of his Doom bots who's like, hey, listen, boss, I got some word to tell you, like, what's happening right now back in the States. The whole idea of the Incredible Hulk. Now, in our last video for the Avengers, when it came to the Hulk, he attacked Avengers Island and like wrecked the entire team in a few pages. Literally just beat them all down. But when it came to Doctor Doom, he didn't hear about the Hulk until, well, this exact moment. And so once you have Doctor Doom being able to collect different information about the Hulk, he realized how powerful the Hulk truly is. Now for Doctor Doom, it's him also telling us the Hulk could be more powerful than the Silver Surfer because it's gamma radiation. It's maybe stronger than cosmic radiation. Who knows technically, but you do have Doctor Doom go out of his way to use his computers to kind of figure out the true secret behind the Hulk. Like, who is the Hulk? And so after like a brief moment, he realized or discovers the Hulk is Bruce Banner. And so we kind of get this flashback, right? In this flashback, we kind of get reminded that in the college days for Doctor Doom, he was part of this small circle of other characters we've seen so far in the Heroes Reborn reality. So like Reed Richards, Tony Stark, Hank Pym, Bruce Banner, and Rebel. Now, by this point in timeline, Rebel died in an earlier issue of Iron Man. But anyways, for Doctor Doom, he remembers having this conversation with Bruce Banner. And when it came to Bruce Banner, he even talked back then about creating the gamma bomb. But he only created it as a way to see it not be used at all. Now, Doctor Doom calls Bruce Banner an idiot. Like, so let me get this straight. You're going to create a bomb to never be used at all, to just sit there? And for me, I kind of agree with Doctor Doom because as we saw for Bruce Banner, he did create the gamma bomb, but for the military. And of course, he even then teamed up with Hydra, hoping that it would get dismantled. But of course, it wasn't. It was technically used, but to create the Hulk, as we all saw in the earlier videos of Iron Man. Now, for Doctor Doom, he kind of realized that with the Hulk being out there, all his old college friends, Reed, Hank Pym, and also Tony Stark and Bruce Banner will be involved in some type of situation where they all could just be killed off. allowing Dr. Doom the chance to just roll over the world. And so it's him saying like, hey, you know what? I'm going to sit here and wait to see the actual outcome of this event. And so we now jump into the second chapter. That last few pages where Dr. Doom's in his lab finding out about Bruce being the Hulk, that was really the prologue for the Industrial Revolution. So now we can fully dive into the actual, crossover, where we do pick up with Avengers issue number 6. Now, when it comes to Avengers issue number 6, it picks up with Bruce Banner breaking into the Baxter building. Now, here's the thing, because Homeboy does not get that far because he is instantly confronted by most of the members of the Fantastic Four, the Human Torch, Susan Storm, and also Ben Grimm. But while you do have Bruce be confronted by these three characters, he tells them like, hey, listen, I just need to talk to Reed Richards. And so you do have Reed appear. Now, Reed does appear. This kind of picks up where our last Avengers video left off at, because when it came to Hulk, he went over to Avengers Island, just wrecked the entire place. The problem is that there is a gamma core there. If that core blows up, boom, there goes the island, but also a huge chunk of the nation as well. And so right now for Bruce, he's there asking for the help of Reed Richards. Again, another callback to the idea that Reed and Bruce and a few other characters were good friends back in college. And so now we do switch over to Avengers Island. Now remember, for most of the people in the world right now, they don't know that Bruce Banner is the Hulk. But this crossover kind of gives our heroes the ability to figure out like, okay, Bruce is the Hulk. Cool. But for right now, no one knows that. But when we do jump over to Avengers Island, we see how badly damaged it was by the Hulk fighting against the Avengers. Now, you do have S.H.I.E.L.D. being able to find Hellcat, Steve Rogers. The thing is, Swordsman and Hawkeye are critically injured at the moment. So for right now, they're not going to be in this actual crossover. Now, when it comes to Nick Fury, he tries to send in a team to deal with the Gamma Core. The problem is that because it's already badly damaged, some of that radiation of the core is already leaking out. So it comes to some people trying to get close to it. Unfortunately, they can't. They die in a matter of seconds when they try to get close to the actual core. And so for Nick Fury, he kind of realized he needs some better tech or something to kind of help out with this situation. Now, again, for Nick Fury, he has no idea that Bruce is the Hulk, but also Bruce right now is getting the help of Reed Richards. Now, that leads into Nick Fury being confronted by Loki. Now, when it comes to Loki, he's the reason why the Hulk went over to Avengers Island in our last video and just basically wrecked the entire place. Because for Loki, he's working with the Enchantress. And when it came to Loki, he wanted the Avengers off the board. So did she as well, but for a completely different reason. For Enchantress, she wanted them out of the way to allow her the ability to grab the Scarlet Witch. And the reason why, because she believes the Scarlet Witch is, well, her daughter. Either way, you do have Loki right now confronting Nick Fury. And for Nick, he's kind of wondering, who in the world is this guy here at the moment? Now, we do briefly jump over to the Fantastic Four, and you do have our heroes arrive to Avengers Island. The thing is, when you do arrive, you didn't have our heroes realize how badly the place is damaged thanks to the Hulk, but they don't have any idea what did actually damage this island just yet. But they do find Thor just laying there, still unconscious at the moment. But now it's time for us to get Iron Man into the book as well, because around this time in Marvel Comics, when it came to Iron Man, he was not technically working with the other characters just yet, the Fantastic Four or the Avengers. And so when he does arrive for Nick Fury, this is the one guy he knows nothing about. He's kind of like, who in the world is this Iron Man guy? Now, for Iron Man, he does want to help out with this situation. And Nick says no at first. But you have Iron Man say like, listen, my boss, Tony Stark, because I'm his bodyguard, he built most of your equipment. So I have all the different codes to technically shut you down. So how about this? Allow me to help you, or I'm going to go ahead and shut everything down that you're currently using that was created by Tony Stark, including Avengers Island. And so you have Nick say, fine, you get 1 hour, and Tony leaves to go see the other heroes. But let's not forget that it was Iron Man's comics that gave us the Hulk in this reality. Matter of fact, for Tony Stark and for most people, they still believe that Bruce is dead and not realizing that Bruce is the Hulk. So when you have Ben Grimm flying past Iron Man because Thor punched him that hard, and you have the Human Torch go grab the thing, you have the two guys inform Tony like, Bruce is alive. And for Tony, he can't believe what he's currently hearing. And so this kind of leads into the Fantastic Four meeting up with the Avengers. Now, technically, at this point in time, the two teams had already met because when it came to Namor, when he had attacked Manhattan, the Avengers helped out with that situation alongside with the Fantastic Four. But with that being said, with the two teams coming together, you have Reed tell the Avengers like, hey, listen, I brought somebody else who could possibly help us out, and that would be Bruce Banner. The problem is that you have Hellcat being able to realize that Bruce is the Hulk, because of course, both characters had the same scent. Now, of course, that makes Bruce kind of freak out a tad bit. And so while you have everyone discussing like what to do with the Gamma Core, you didn't have Bruce Banner turn into the Hulk to wrap up the second chapter of this storyline. And so now we do switch over to Iron Man issue number 6. Now, with this issue right here, we do pick up with the Hulk just throwing a tantrum. Now, you do have Susan being able to kind of keep the Hulk at bay, which honestly, I'm kind of impressed. And the reason why, because this is still early on in Heroes Reborn. So for Susan, even though she has technically learned how to use her powers in better ways, I'm just surprised to see how strong she is now to be able to kind of keep up a force field to keep the Hulk at bay. Now, they're also kind of hoping that if the Hulk does calm down, he'll turn back into Bruce Banner. But you have Reed say that's not going to happen, because with the whole idea of the gamma radiation leaking out because of the Gamma Core, Bruce will stay as a Hulk until they're able to handle that situation right there. And while you have all this stuff just popping off, you have Loki just being able to keep teasing Nick Fury. I kind of like this a lot because it's just him truly being the god of mischief. And the thing is, Nick Fury is the only person who sees Loki at the moment. So for everybody else are kind of like, hey, who is Nick talking to? And why in the world is he freaking out at the moment? But in reality, it is Nick Fury just talking to Loki. But as we do switch back over to our heroes, you do have Reed and Tony being able to figure out what they have to do to save the day. Now, they say they have to redirect the Gamma Core energy into the Earth core. Now, here's the thing, because while you do have the two characters talking to one another, Reed kind of realized that Tony is Iron Man, but just pretending that, yeah, you're Tony Stark's bodyguard. That's right, cool, But in reality, Reed knows for sure. Now, when it comes to Tony and Reed, like I said, they had realized they had to redirect the energy of the Gamma Core into the Earth core to save the nation from being hit with gamma radiation. Now, I feel like that's a bad idea. But you do have Thor and also Ben Grimm go inside this room to kind of help redirect that energy into the right area. But it kind of leads into Ben Grimm and also really Thor working together to kind of clear a path over to the Gamma Core. The problem is that when they do get close to the Gamma Core, it begins to hit them pretty hard, which means that they're no longer really able to change the direction of the energy of the Gamma Core into the Earth core. Now, while you have Iron Man trying to talk to Reed through one of his many computers, Hulk is just talking so loud that for Tony, he can't hear Reed. And so you have Tony go off on the Hulk. Like, Hulk, listen, right now, you're not helping. And technically right now, the only thing you're doing is ticking me off. If you want to help out, get down there and redirect that energy to the Earth core. Because if you don't, 12 million people are going to die very soon. Now, this is Tony kind of talking to the Hulk like Hulk is not really intelligent at all, but it does seem like the Hulk does have some kind of intelligence because his connection to Bruce Banner. But right after you have Tony just go off on the Hulk, Hulk's like, okay, you know what? Let me go ahead and help out. You're right. I should totally help out. It's a quick switch where the Hulk is no longer this man-child, but now actually acting like, well, a hero. And this kind of leads into a very rushed ending for this chapter, but technically there's still one more chapter left. It's an epilogue, and it gets weird all over again how they kind of did this whole crossover. And you see what I mean here in a moment, but you do have the Hulk being able to help out with the Gamma Core, and the day seems to be saved. And you have the Human Torch being able to absorb all the heat energy that was coming out of the Gamma Core and release it in the air. So just like that, the day is saved. Now for Steve Rogers, he kind of feels like this is the official end to the Avengers. But you have Iron Man say, no, not just yet. And this leads into the epilogue, which is in Captain America issue number 6. Here comes the problem with that issue. Because as we dive into Captain America issue number 6, the first storyline has nothing to do with the Industrial Revolution. Instead, it's more of us seeing Cable teaming up with Steve Rogers. And that's really it. Like literally, you have Cable appear in this reality. And this is Cable from the main Marvel universe who was transported over to this reality. And so it's him right now just helping out Steve Rogers to fight against different members of the AIM organization, but also Steve fighting against some characters he fought in the past in this timeline, but also in the old main Marvel Universe timeline as well. But let's not forget, around this time in the main Marvel Universe, there was no Avengers. There was no Fantastic Four because they had quote unquote died in the Onslaught crossover. So for Cable to be here in this reality, to fight alongside with Steve Rogers, he's kind of like, man, this is great because the guy reminds me of my Steve Rogers from Mine Reality, who I fought alongside with in the Onslaught crossover. But either way, for Steve, he's just fighting against AIM, fighting against MODOK, and also fighting against Baron Zemo as well. But for Cable, as he continues to watch Steve Rogers, he also realized that Steve has another Bucky in this reality. And matter of fact, we met her in our last video for Steve Rogers in this reality. And that would be Rebecca Barnes. Now, let's not forget, guys, when it comes to the Heroes Reborn reality, when it first came out in Marvel Comics, we were kind of left to believe to be a separate reality from the main Marvel Universe. But then over time, with all the different clues popping up left and right, interviews, all that different stuff, we kind of learned that this is actually a pocket dimension in the main Marvel Universe. And the reason why I'm bringing it up now, because for Rebecca Barnes, you could technically say that she is the sister to, well, the Winter Soldier over in the main Marvel Universe, because technically she is a grandchild to, well, Winter Soldier's grandparents as well. But either way, it's just Cable watching Steve and her working together as a team. Now, by this point in the timeline, she's officially Bucky. The last time we saw her, she was not Bucky at all just yet. But really, for the storyline that takes place at first in this issue, it does wrap up very quickly where you do have Steve Rogers being able to take down AIM, MODOK, and also, well, Baron Zemo as well. But right after doing that, you didn't have Cable get pulled back into his reality. Now, he kind of gets this idea that the reality he was just at, the hero he just met, could be his hero from his reality, just lost in a different one. And so his main goal now for Cable supposedly is to find a way to bring back Steve Rogers and the rest of the heroes. But he does go back home. But this leads into literally the last 2 pages of the Industrial Revolution. And like I said, it's just random to me because you get Nick Fury just going back over to his room, right, to finally get some kind of rest, except that is when he's confronted by Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and they're all there to say like, hey, listen, Nick, so we are no longer going to have the Avengers working for S.H.I.E.L.D. The Avengers are now officially going in their own direction. And that's really it. And I'm kind of like, what is the actual point to have these 2 pages kept this one particular issue. These 2 pages could have been used over in the Iron Man issue that you just technically finished the story yet. And so, yeah, that's the end for the Industrial Revolution crossover for the Heroes Reborn, their first event in this, well, pocket dimension. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the Heroes Reborn reality. And we do pick up with good old Steve Rogers once again with Captain America issue number 7. Now, the only reason why I'm covering one issue because the next storyline for Steve Rogers kind of leads into the end of Heroes Reborn for his series, but also the entire reality as well. But anyways, when it came to issue number 7, it was really more of Marvel trying to reestablish a supposed origin for Steve Rogers in this reality. And guys, by this point in the whole storyline, when it came to Rob Liefeld, he left the book. Technically, Marvel kind of pushed him off the book because the sales were pretty low around that time. And so you had a guy known as James Robinson come in. Now, when it came to James, his first storyline was really more of him just trying to, give us the rundown on the origin of Steve Rogers in his reality, but also kind of add a tad bit more information to it. And so as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up with Nick Fury with Contessa Valentina as well, and they're having a meeting with good old, well, Bill Clinton. Here's the thing, because with Bill Clinton, around this time with him being president, he felt like he should know everything about Steve Rogers, because to him, Steve Rogers is a war hero. He's Captain America. Now, you have Nick try his best to tell Bill, like, listen, you don't want to know everything about good old Steve. But it's Bill saying, like, no, I should know because one, I am the president, but two, like, I've been a fan of the guy for many years. Now, you have Nick tell Bill that there were other presidents before him who never truly learned about the actual origin of Steve Rogers. The only person who did know was Nixon. Now, the thing was, they kind of used Nixon to kind of begin the process of hiding the true origin of Steve Rogers. And let me explain. Because for Bill Clinton, what he believes that he knows about Steve Rogers is technically wrong. You see, for Bill, he believed that Steve came from Iowa, that Steve was some farm boy, but then out of nowhere, he got the call to go fight in World War II, and then became Captain America and became a war hero, this great figure for people to look up to. But you didn't have Contessa and also Nick say like, okay, so you are completely wrong. Like, that is not even close to his actual origin. Because even though this is an alternate reality, technically, when it comes to Steve Rogers, his origin is still very similar to his main Marvel Universe counterpart, where, yes, he did answer the call to go out there and fight in the war, but he also was part of an experiment. Of course, the idea that there were other people that were given the super soldier serum, but unfortunately, it didn't work on them. But in some kind of way, it did work for Steve Rogers. So, of course, he became Captain America, going out there and fighting against the Red Skull, like we always know. Now, for Bill Clinton, he kind of gets the idea that he did not know the beginning, but he did know the middle part. Like, okay, I had no idea that technically he was part of some kind of experiment, but at least I figured that he was this war hero who fought against characters like the Red Skull or Valkyrie and also a bunch of Nazis out there as well. But you didn't have Bill say, like, okay, there have been so many different stories of what happened to Steve after the war. Like, for example, he believed that Steve was frozen in ice. There was also the idea of a time machine. There was also the idea that he almost had died, so he went away so the world would not know that he was dying. Like, there were so many different stories that Bill and the public had heard about what happened to Steve after the war. But you didn't have Nick say, none of that is true. And guys, don't forget, we covered the first storyline for Steve Rogers in this reality, and we have learned what they did to him. You see, when it came to Rob Liefeld in the first issue of Captain America, he kind of told us that after the war was officially ended, Steve and Nixon got into an argument. You see, for Nixon, he wanted Steve to stand by his side as he told the American public, like, hey, listen, so we had just dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. Now, for Steve, he was not okay with that. And the reason why, because innocent people were killed off. Like, yes, Japan was their enemy, but it was the government. It was the military, not the people of Japan. And so for Steve, he was kind of upset by that. And he said, you know what? I cannot stand by your side as you tell the American public what you did. And so Steve stormed out of the office. And so when it came to Nixon, he told Nick, like, we got to make sure that man right there is under our control, because if we have an angry, Steve Rogers, an angry Captain America out in the public, it'll make us look bad. And so you had Nick control the mind of Steve Rogers. Now, we were told that when it came to Nick, he got the idea from the Nazis, from the Red Skull. That's not the case anymore in this issue. Because Nick's saying, like, okay, you had the OSS, and the OSS was like the predecessor to the CIA. And when it came to the OSS, they had so many different people that was so covert, they had no place to go. And so that created S.H.I.E.L.D. You had a CIA, but you also have S.H.I.E.L.D. And S.H.I.E.L.D. is more advanced, but also they work a whole lot better behind the scenes, better than the CIA does. And so when it came to S.H.I.E.L.D., they had different types of technology that was so advanced. Of course, they had ways to control the mind of Steve Rogers. Now, we had learned the first issue that when it came to Steve in the 90s, he believed that he had a family, a wife, a child. But what about the prior years? What about the years after World War II? And so it's Nick telling us a few moments in time they tried to control Steve in different types of ways. So what we had learned that yes, they kept him on ice technically, but they were released Steve out in different points in time to use him in different American conflicts. But here's the thing, his mind was messed with. And so for Steve Rogers, he would fight in the Korean War. He would fight in the Vietnam War, but he would have different names in those wars. Like, for example, John Battle or Jack Strike. The problem was that he would have these episodes when it came to being the American hero in those wars. And so for Nick and S.H.I.E.L.D., they kind of realized, like, hey, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we should keep him on ice. And that led into the 1990s, where they finally let him go. But of course, they gave him a family, a different type of life. And he was doing good for a while. But the problem was that all his old enemies are popping up left and right. Baron Zemo, the Red Skull. You also have the Avengers needing his help. You also have AIM popping up left and right. And so over time for Steve, he had no choice but to remember who he was. He had no choice to go ahead and get back into that role as Captain America. Now, while you had Nick, Contessa, and also Bill having this conversation, Steve Rogers was outside listening in the entire time. And so this kind of leads into the ending of this issue, where we do see Steve Rogers walking in, right? He's kind of like, hey, listen, so I am disgusted by what the government did to me. I am disgusted by what S.H.I.E.L.D. did to me. And so it's him kind of saying, like, I'm no longer going to be under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s protection, but I'm also no longer going to be used by the government either. I'm going to basically travel across the country to rediscover my love for this country, for America, and the ways I felt in love with when it came to the American way. But it's Steve tearing off the old symbol, which is going to lead to him wearing a different symbol, a big A symbol instead. But with that being said, this is the actual ending of this book, because you do have Bill kind of like, hey, listen, man, I had nothing to do with what happened to you in the past, but I agree. Go out there and have the chance to rediscover the country and fall back in love with it. Now, at first, you have Nick being somewhat upset, but you didn't have Nick say, you know what? That's right. We did do you dirty. We basically did control your entire life almost. You know what? You have the right to finally be, well, free. And so this Okay, so getting back into our coverage over Captain America in the Heroes Reborn reality, we kind of pick up with the idea of Steve Rogers trying to rediscover America once again. And let me explain why. Because when it came to Steve Rogers, this man truly did have a messed up origin in the Heroes Reborn reality. You see, in the Heroes Reborn reality, you still have Steve Rogers go out of his way to fight in World War II. Now, as we all know, in the main Marvel universe, he was frozen in time after the war. The thing is, in this reality, that was not the case. You see, for Steve Rogers, he had a meeting with Nixon. And when it came to Nixon, he asked Steve to go with him and tell the public what America had did to Japan. Of course, dropping the bombs. When it came to Steve Rogers, he hated the idea of America using those bombs on innocent people. For Steve, it's okay to go after the government of Japan or the military that belongs to Japan, but not the innocent people. And so for Steve, he could not stand by Nixon when Nixon told the public what America military had did to Japan. And so he walked away. And for Nixon, he hated the idea that he was no longer able to control Captain America. That is where Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. came in, and let me explain. You see, when it came to Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., they just got started in World War II, but also they had technology that would allow them to control the minds of different people, like Steve Rogers. And so for Steve, for the next 50 years, this man would live different lives in those 50 years. Like, for example, there was one point in time he believed to be a guy known as Jack who was fighting in the Korean War or the Vietnam War. And the thing was, in the 1990s, you had S.H.I.E.L.D. give him 2 life model decoys to make him believe that he had a wife and kid. But in reality, he did not. Now, in the 90s, for Steve Rogers, he had to go back being Captain America. And the reason why? Because the Red Skull had reappeared. But either way, once Steve had realized for 50 years the government of America had been playing with his mind, he had to leave the White House to go travel across America to kind of rediscover his love for the country. But this kind of leads into Steve Rogers arriving in Texas. Now, when he does arrive in Texas, he gets word of this brand new organization, better known as the Sons of Serpent. Now, the Sons of Serpent have been around for a good while in Marvel Comics, but basically, they're this organization who believe that, America should be white only, and that is it. All minorities should leave or be killed off. And we kind of get our first example in this chapter because once you have Steve arrive in Texas, he gets word the Sons of Serpent had taken over a diner nearby and are holding on to a few hostages. Now, one of those hostages is an African American. And so, of course, they want to kill him off because, again, their main goal is to, quote unquote, cleanse America. Get rid of all minorities across the entire country. And so you do have this diner be taken over by a few members of the Sons of Serpent. And so that leads into Steve Rogers arriving, but as Captain America. Now, we already know our boy is going to be able to take these guys down very easily. But after doing that, you have Steve be confronted by the African American hostage. Now, in this storyline, you're going to have different people kind of talk to Steve about how great he is because other people to them have fought alongside with Steve Rogers, heard about him or saw him, but in some kind of way, he had inspired a whole lot of people back in the 1940s when it came to World War II. Now for Steve Rogers, his main goal is to figure out who are these Sons of Serpent, because for him, it's completely wrong to go after minorities for no actual good reason. Now, once you have Steve leave the diner, he's then confronted by the sheriff of this town. And you have the sheriff tell Steve, like, hey, you know what? What you did was great and all and everything, but we need your help to take down their compound here in Texas. But it's Steve kind of finding out here that, this is a whole nationwide organization, not just a Texas problem. And so you do have Steve head over to that Texas compound. And so that leads into Steve Rogers heading over to this compound. Now, when he does arrive at this compound, is Steve wanting to have a peaceful conversation with a few members of the Sons of Serpents to just come out of the compound with their hands up. Like, there's no need for a gunfight with them and the FBI agents. Now, the problem is that they get Steve pretty angry. And the reason why, because you had these guys bring up the idea that minorities should not be in America, that basically they're ruining this country. And so for Steve, he hates the idea of what they're trying to say to him right now. So of course, you have Steve give them a speech they don't like about the idea of like, no, this country is for everybody. And so with them now being upset with Steve Rogers, they come out gun blazing. But here's the problem though, because this organization, they have some high-tech weapons they're basically using right now on Steve and these FBI agents. Now, you do have Steve being able to take them all down, but the problem is that there are a lot of people who got hurt because of them. Innocent people who are getting hurt because this organization believes in the idea of killing off minorities. Now for Steve, his main goal is to shut them down. But at the same time, he wants to figure out how in the world was this organization able to get their hands on some very high-tech weapons. And so with Steve Rogers now knowing like, okay, this is not only a Texas problem, this is a nationwide problem, he heads over to California. Really, he heads over to Hollywood. And of course, when he does arrive at Hollywood, he runs into a few members of the Sons of Serpents. So of course, this leads into a few pages where it's our hero just doing his job, taking these guys out. Now, with that being put aside at the moment, you then have Steve Rogers being able to meet up with Detective O'Brien. Now, Detective O'Brien, he does have a few members of the Sons of Serpent with him. The problem is that they're not talking to anybody. And so for Steve, that right there is a problem. So you have Steve go out of his way to make one of the members that he caught recently alongside with O'Brien to kind of talk to him about what are the plans for the Sons of Serpent in this area. Now that guy also told Steve like, hey, if you go over here, you'll find the Hollywood headquarters for the Sons of Serpents. And so for Steve, when he heads over there, he breaks into the base, takes out a few guards, but finds their computer. Now, once he's able to hack their computers, he learns the Sons of Serpents in the Hollywood area, they also have some dangerous weapons. But on top of that, he also learns that a branch of the U.S. government is providing these weapons over to the Sons of Serpents. The question is now, which branch of the U.S. government is doing that? But after that, you then have Steve head over to the next location where the Sons of Serpents are going to be at. You see, for Steve, he had just learned the Sons of Serpents, they had kidnapped a few people who are Jewish writers in Hollywood and a few other people who had hired minority writers into Hollywood stuff. And so, of course, for the Sons of Serpents, they're planning to blow them up. Now, of course, you do have Steve arrive just in time and being able to save these guys' lives very easily. But after that, you didn't have Steve being able to meet up with Detective O'Brien. Now, when he does, is Steve now finding out that the Sons of Serpents, they're now attacking all over the nation, just left and right. But also, you have their leader, King Serpent, go on live television, telling his people to keep going, to keep attacking people of minority races. Just keep blowing things up our people left and right. And so for Steve, he wants some answers. Because remember, for Steve, he had learned that a U.S. government branch is providing this organization weapons. And so for Steve, he must head back over to Washington, D.C. to figure out which branch of the government is giving these guys these weapons. Now, as we dive into the third chapter, we're really picking up with Steve Rogers in Washington, D.C., meeting up with Nick Fury. Now, when the two guys do meet up, it's Nick Fury informing Steve, like, hey, listen, so S.H.I.E.L.D. has been planning to go after the Sons of Serpents for a while now. And matter of fact, I just put together a strike team to give us that chance to finally bring them down. And so for Steve, of course, he wants to join that strike team to finally bring them down. Now, here's the thing, because you also have Steve ask Nick about his family. the life model decoy family. And I feel so bad for Steve. And the reason why, because you have Nick say like, oh, your wife, which again was a life model decoy, she's on a different mission right now with a bomb inside of her to kill off one of our targets. And your son, yeah, we're using him right now for different body parts. And it's really sad because for Steve, he's kind of like, man, I had a family in this reality, and unfortunately, they were fake. But either way, you do have Steve go ahead and join the strike team. Now, earlier, when it came to Steve Rogers, he met up with Bucky. Now, remember, in this reality, Bucky is better known as Rebecca Barnes, this young girl who is technically related to the original Bucky, but let's not get into it. Now, when it comes to this Bucky, she talks to Steve about the idea that she wants to be more than a sidekick. She wants to be his friend. Now, for Steve, he's kind of like, yeah, you know what? We can be friends. But it's also Rebecca informing Steve that she kind of realized that different people are acting weird on the helicarrier. And so you have Steve tell Rebecca like, hey, listen, stay on the helicarrier and kind of watch out for different things, but make sure you're not seen. Now, earlier for Steve Rogers, he had also called up Sam Wilson, better known as Falcon. Now, in this reality, when it came to Falcon, he kind of got a blood transfusion from Steve Rogers. So for Falcon, he's actually a super soldier in the Heroes Reborn reality, but we have not seen Falcon since the first story arc in this series. But it's Steve saying like, hey, Falcon, I called you in once I heard that you are a superhero, but also I need your help to locate the base of the Serpent. So of course, you have Sam agree to help out Steve. Now, back in the present day, you do have Falcon being able to find the base of the Serpents. The problem is that he went alone. And so, of course, he got easily overpowered and does seem like he's a prisoner. Now, for Steve Rogers, he's right now with that strike team from earlier. And so with that strike team from earlier, you have Steve realize there's something wrong here. And the reason why, because every single member of this strike team is a non-white American person, which of course tells Steve this is an ambush. And just like that, Steve called it correctly, because you didn't have the Serpents come out of nowhere and begin to attack Steve Rogers and the strike team. And so this kind of leads into the ending of this chapter, because with the ambush happening, you now have Steve and the strike team trying their best to, well, survive. Now, there's an explosion, and we're kind of left to believe that Steve is dead. But of course, as we all know, Steve is not dead. But you do have one of the strike team members inform Nick Fury that Steve Rogers is dead. Now, for Nick, he's kind of sad, but you kind of tell like, oh, well, gotta move on. But the thing is, while you have Nick get inside his little, aircraft vehicle thing, you have Steve sneak into the trunk of the actual craft. And the reason why, because you had Nick head over to this location. And we kind of find out who is the actual leader of the Sons of Serpents. It's actually Nick Fury himself. And so as we get into the final chapter of the storyline, we really do pick up with the idea that yes, Nick Fury is the man in charge of the Sons of Serpent. Now, he still believes that Steve Rogers is currently dead. And so with Steve Rogers being supposedly dead, he tells his Sons of Serpents to begin to attack all over America left and right. Now, while you have that going on, let's not forget that when it came to Bucky, she told Steve earlier that she feels like there's something off when it comes to what's happening on S.H.I.E.L.D. Helicarrier at the moment. And so you have Steve tell her to stay behind, to hide in the shadows, to figure out what is actually been hidden right now on the helicarrier. And so for Bucky, we see her just sneaking around the place. But you do have Bucky find this one room that's kind of guarded very well. And so you have Bucky being able to take out the guards that lead into that one particular room. And so you have Steve go ahead and confront Nick Fury. Now, when he does, it's really more Steve wanting to know, like, why did Nick do it for? Because Steve can't believe that Nick would create this organization that's full of people who's hating on minorities. And the thing is, even though Steve and Nick never saw eye to eye, Steve still saw Nick as somebody who loves America, who wants to protect America. Now, you have Nick tell Steve the reason why he had created the Sons of Serpent is because he hated the idea of minorities being given so much government assistance. Because for him, once he does retire, he has almost no money saved for his retirement. And so that's why he had created the Sons of Serpents. And so right now for Steve Rogers, he's kind of, listen, you know what? You and I going to fight one-on-one. If I defeat you, you must stop what you're doing right now and shut down the entire organization. If you beat me, well, of course, you may continue. And so you have Nick agree to have a one-on-one battle with Steve. Now, for a brief moment, we do switch back over to Bucky. And the reason why, because you have Bucky find something, or really someone, very important for the storyline, where, of course, you kind of get the idea where the story is truthfully going. But getting back over to the battle between Steve and also Nick Fury, you have Steve and Nick go back and forth. Like literally, it does seem like they're evenly matched, even though I kind of feel like Steve should be able to easily take down Nick Fury. Now for Nick, he's kind of like, listen, even though I did agree to fight against you, even though I did agree to, say if you win, I'll go ahead and stop. The thing is, I already gave my order to my men 10 minutes ago. So of course right now my men will sooner or later begin their attacks across America. And you then have Nick tell his Sons of Serpents, who are there with him at the moment, to go ahead and jump Steve Rogers. Now for Steve, he's kind of like, this is not fair. I am easily outnumbered. But you have Steve use his shield as a way to free Falcon, because Falcon is a prisoner of the Sons of Serpents. And so with Falcon being free, you technically now have two super soldiers working together to bring down the Sons of Serpents. And this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline, because we do see here that the Nick Fury that Steve has been fighting against is a life model decoy. The real Nick Fury was founded by Bucky earlier on the helicarrier. And so you have the real Nick Fury appear and take out the fake one just like that. And with the fake one being gone, the Sons of Serpent, they have no choice to go ahead and surrender. And the reason why, because the entire place is completely surrounded. Now, this leads into one big question. Was this Nick Fury, or was that life model decoy the Nick Fury the entire time in this series? And the answer is yes, which means the entire time from the first issue up to this one right here, we had a life model decoy pretending to be Nick Fury, but also behind the scenes creating the Sons of Serpent. Because for Nick Fury, he said, listen, I gave the order to go ahead and free you, but then I had a cup of coffee and I was knocked out. Ever since then. So that means for weeks or months, when you have Steve Rogers back out there as Captain America and somewhat working alongside with the Avengers, but also with Nick Fury, that was not Nick Fury. That was a life model decoy. But to go ahead and in today's comic book video, you have Nick Fury get a call. And that call is about what's about to happen very soon to the Earth. The whole idea of Galactus coming. And this leads into the second crossover in the Heroes Reborn reality. Galactus is coming. Like, one more time for y'all. Galactus is on his way to Earth to devour it. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to cover the next big crossover for the Heroes Reborn reality, better known as Heroes Reunited. Now, Heroes Reunited is really more the idea of our heroes coming together because, well, Galactus is coming. And the thing is, in our last few videos that we had covered for the Heroes Reborn reality, we kept seeing the idea of Galactus on his way, like small glimpses here and there, like, okay, he's coming again, he'll be there very soon, but now it's time for him to come to Earth. But for our heroes, they kind of ignored all these different hints of the idea of Galactus, but the problem is kind of like, no. You guys now need to get ready because here he comes. And so In today's video, we're going to cover the prologue and also part 1 of Heroes Reunited. And really, as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we pick up with the Silver Surfer. Now, for the Silver Surfer, let's not forget that he's kind of the reason why our heroes, the Fantastic Four, were able to get their abilities, but also, like, he was captured by Doctor Doom. Now, with him being captured by Doctor Doom and having the Fantastic Four and also Black Panther going out of their way to save his life, it's kind of him feeling bad about the idea of Galactus heading over to their planet. Now, for Galactus, he already sent over his heralds to kind of get the Earth ready for his consumption. But for the Silver Surfer, it's him kind of wondering, how can he save his friends? Or possibly, how can he save the entire planet? And so, even though the other heralds have made their way over to the Earth, it's him saying now, like, okay, I need to get there in a hurry to kind of help them out because the heralds are really powerful and our heroes don't truly stand a chance against the heralds of Galactus. It's kind of sad to see because for the Fantastic Four, they're kind of just hanging out and minding their business. Like, for example, Alicia Masters is making a sculpture of Ben Grimm, kind of showing like their relationship has grown a lot. And it's kind of cool to see, but at the same time, you already know by the end of this series, this right here won't technically matter anymore, but we do shift over to Reed and Sue. And for Reed and Sue, it's really important here because it's Susan telling Reed like, hey, I'm pregnant. Now, let's not forget, when it came to Susan, she was told in this reality that she was not able to have children. But the thing is, she went over to the main Marvel universe and she saw her, original version of herself with a son, Franklin Richards. But once she came back to her supposed reality, is her kind of realizing like, okay, I want to be a mother. And right now, she's pregnant. Now, you do have Susan go ahead and call up Johnny Storm and say, hey, brother, we're having dinner. We got some big news. But for Johnny Storm, he's kind of in this mindset right now where he's just upset about the idea that they had to leave the Inhumans behind because he's fallen in love with Crystal. And so because of that, you have Johnny right now just in the training room, just going extreme levels to kind of keep his mind off the idea of Crystal. But the problem is, once he does finish his training session, his mind goes straight back over to who? Crystal once again. But now we have to shift our focus back over to Terrax. Now, when it comes to Terrax, it's him right now just arriving on Earth. He's one of the heralds of Galactus, and he was tasked to get the world ready for the consumption of Galactus, which means like take out any possible threats that could take down Galactus, like the Fantastic Four, because the Silver Surfer told Galactus about them. And so for Terrax, he can see like, yeah, y'all got some cosmic powers in y'all, but like, hey, it doesn't matter. You still gotta go. And so you do have our heroes try their best to fight against this powerful being who's not really easy to take down. And it kind of shows here because, yeah, for Susan Storm, she is able to put a force field around her to protect herself. But the problem is, like, for Terrax, this man knows what to do. And so he shakes the ground underneath her as a way to attack her. And so just like that, he's showing that no matter what, he has different ways to attack people. Now, when it comes to Reed, of course, he gets very upset about the idea of his girlfriend being attacked at the moment, especially now because she's pregnant. But the problem is, Reed's not powerful enough to take on a guy like Terrax by himself. So, of course, he's also taken out very easily. Now, when it comes to Susan, she tries her best to call up her brother, the Human Torch, who's back at the Baxter building. The problem is that for Johnny, he is not looking at his communicator. Why? Because again, he's still madly in love with Crystal. He missed Crystal so much that he keeps looking at pictures of her. And while you have everything popping off over there for Galactus, this man is truthfully on his way over to the Earth. And so for Galactus, while being in his spacecraft, he looks over data about the Earth. And for this guy, he's getting really hyped about the idea of consuming the Earth because he realized there is a lot of life energy there. And so for him, he's kind of like, this is perfect. All that life energy for myself is pretty great. But as we do switch back over to Johnny Storm, it's him realizing that things have truthfully popped off back at the park with the rest of the Fantastic Four. So you do have Johnny head over there to kind of help them out. Except when he does arrive, you have him and Ben being able to work together to take down Terrax. Now, right after you have our two heroes being able to, take down Terrax for the time being, you then have the two go look for Reed and Susan. Now, they do find Reed. When they find Reed, they are then informed about the idea that Susan is pregnant. So, of course, everyone is excited, but here comes the big problem, though, because yes, they did defeat Terrax. But like I said earlier, the rest of the Heralds of Galactus were also sent over to the Earth, which means here comes Firelord and also Plasma, two other Heralds of Galactus. And of course, for our heroes, it took a lot for them to just take down Terrax. But now they gotta fight against two more Heralds of Galactus. And this leads into Heroes Reunited Part 1. And so as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up with Dr. Doom. Now, this is Dr. Doom arriving at New York City, arriving at the Laverian Embassy. And the reason why, because inside this place, he had his robots work on a brand new armor suit. Now, this armor suit will allow him the ability to siphon off the energy of somebody who has cosmic powers. Like, I don't know, Terrax or Plasma or Firelord or hey, maybe Galactus. But it's Dr. Doom saying like he believes it's officially ready. Now, let's not forget, when it came to Dr. Doom, he was confronted by a future version of himself that tried to warn him about their future and handed him a card that held information about their future. But for Dr. Doom, he took that card and added it into his armor suit. But now we're kind of able to switch over to the Fantastic Four as you do have the Human Torch in the Thing wanting to fight against the Heralds of Galactus. Now, of course, this is a bad idea because it took the entire team to defeat just one of the Heralds of Galactus. But now you're talking about three of them. Now, for Reed, he tries his best to kind of talk everything out. But with the idea of Terrax being a hothead character and also Ben Grimm as well, of course, it does lead into a battle. But like I said, these guys are Heralds of Galactus, so technically our heroes do not even stand a chance against these guys. But luckily for our heroes, you do have the Silver Surfer arrive at the very last second. And this is really more of the Silver Surfer kind of telling us, the readers, but also the other Heralds of Galactus, that he looks at the Fantastic Four as not just heroes or just powerful beings, but also as his friends. Now, you do have Terrax kind of confused about the idea of the Silver Surfer kind of not really doing what their master had asked him to do. But you didn't have Galactus call back his heralds, and you have all four of them leave just like that. But right after you have the Heralds of Galactus leave, you then have our heroes be called up by S.H.I.E.L.D. And so you have our heroes head over to the helicarrier. Now, this begins the process of the actual crossover. So the Fantastic Four are being confronted by Nick Fury and also the Avengers. And so you do have Nick Fury say like, hey guys, listen, this room right here, it handles space problems. And we kind of find out that you had S.H.I.E.L.D. detected the spacecraft that Galactus used as a way to travel across the universe. And apparently he had just passed the moon. So he's right outside the Earth space at the moment. And so you had Nick go ahead and sent out these probes to kind of get a good idea of what they're looking at. Now, most of their probes do get destroyed, except for one. And so it's now our heroes getting their first look at the spacecraft that belongs to Galactus. Now, on the actual spacecraft, we do pick up with the Heralds of Galactus meeting up with, well, Galactus. And this is Galactus saying that he feels like it's officially time to begin the process of consuming the Earth. Now, for the Silver Surfer, he wants to have a conversation with Galactus, possibly convince him to leave Earth alone. But again, earlier we saw that for Galactus, the Earth right now is holding a lot of energy that he would love to consume. And so, unfortunately, he tells Surfer, no, let's go ahead and move on with our plans. But getting back over to our heroes, is our heroes right now listening to Reed Richard? Because for Reed, he's kind of telling the heroes what he realized throughout the entire series. The whole idea of all these things being connected. The Silver Surfer, Galactus, the Skrulls, the Inhumans, Mole Man. In some crazy way, all these different things are connected to one another. And so for Reed, as he goes on with his speech, that is when S.H.I.E.L.D. is then informed about some kind of new device that Galactus had just released. Now, this device is breaking apart into multiple components that will travel across the Earth. And so for our heroes, what they want to do is go to those different locations and try their best to get rid of those components. Now, for Reed, he'll stay behind. And the reason why, because he's going to try his best to create a device that should possibly help our heroes win against Galactus. So this leads into the first team to go after the first component that did crash land in the Himalayas by Firelord putting it there. Now, the first team is the Human Torch and the Inhumans. Now, this makes a lot of sense. And the reason why, because as we all know, for Johnny Storm, he's madly in love with Crystal, but also he wants to help out the Inhumans. Now, here's the thing, because Firelord is actually a very strong opponent. And even though you do have the Human Torch there, when it comes to Firelord, his powers are completely different from the Human Torch. So unfortunately for Johnny, he's not really able to do anything to Firelord, but Firelord can. Now, you do have Firelord kind of tell us that the humans should not be trying to attack him because he is a herald of Galactus. And let's not forget, when it came to the Inhumans, they looked at Galactus and his heralds as pantheons, as gods. And so you have Firelord say like, hey, you can't attack me because, as you all know, once the Earth is consumed, your energy, your souls will go into your great god, better known as Galactus. And so now the question is, do the Inhumans attack Firelord to save the Earth or not do anything because of their culture? But you have Black Bolt choose the idea of saving the planet. And so for Black Bolt, he does attack the component that Firelord had placed down. Now, here's the problem though, because this component is storing a lot of energy. So with the idea of our heroes trying to get rid of it, of course, it begins to blow up. And so we're kind of left to believe of the idea that, well, the Inhumans plus the Human Torch had just died. Now, the second team will be the Avengers, and they went over to Monster Island. And the reason why, because Plasma, the other herald of Galactus, well, she had placed her component right on Monster Island. So you do have our heroes arrive there and try their best to get rid of it. The problem is, it's our heroes fighting against Plasma, but also fighting against Mole Man, because Monster Island is Mole Man's home. Now, while you do have our heroes being able to fight against both Plasma and also Mole Man, the component has been activated. And so you have Namor go ahead and say, you know what? Let me sacrifice my life as a way to save the world. And so you have Namor take the component into the depths of a trench nearby, hoping the water pressure will be strong enough to just go ahead and destroy the component, but also making sure the explosion does not hit our heroes nor Monster Island. Now, for the surviving heroes, they do go back over to New York, except when they do, they're now seeing S.H.I.E.L.D. trying to fight against Galactus, which honestly is a bad idea, but they're trying. And you have Nick trying to use the helicarrier as a way to attack Galactus with all the weapons on the helicarrier. But you have Galactus take one shot, and just like that, the helicarrier is now about to blow up. And the reason why? Because of the reactor core. And so you have Nick tell all of his agents to get the heck out of there. Because for Nick, what he's going to do now is pilot the helicarrier over to Galactus, hoping that when the reactor core blows up, it might do some serious damage to Galactus or possibly stop him, but also his devices as well. And so for our heroes, unfortunately, they have to watch Nick Fury give up his life to hopefully save the world. And so just like that, there is an explosion. Except for Nick Fury, his plan does not work at all because you have Galactus survive the explosion, but you didn't have Galactus use the metal on the different skyscrapers around him to repair the damage done to his devices that Nick Fury had tried to blow up. So technically, Nick's plan had completely failed. And so for our heroes, they're kind of like, okay, we got to retreat right now because technically we're losing this battle. We gotta find a way to stop this guy. And so this kind of leads into our heroes having a meeting, right? Now, when our heroes do have this meeting, it's really more of Reed trying to re-explain everything to us again. Like, hey, those components out there, they were technically being used as a way to kind of get the Earth ready for Galactus to consume. Now, once you do have our heroes learn that lesson right there, we also learn here that for Reed, he had created this device that should allow our heroes to fight against the cosmic beings, like nullify their cosmic attacks. Now, you do have Ben Grimm go ahead and put on the device, but while you do have our heroes talking to one another, two things happen. The first is that you have Susan find out that Johnny is dead. But now our heroes are once again attacked by Terrax. Now for our heroes, they're really able to take care of Terrax very easily now, thanks to Ben Grimm's device. Sorry, Reed Richards' device, not Ben Grimm's device. But with Terrax being handled, you then have our heroes shift their focus onto taking out the main device that Galactus is currently using. The problem is that all their different weapons are not really working when it comes to trying to get rid of it. Now, the last few pages of the storyline, man, it's really rough for our heroes because you have Ben Grimm say, you know what, let me go ahead and use the device that Reed gave me and absorb the energy of Galactus. The problem is that you have Galactus go ahead and take all the energy that Ben Grimm had absorbed from Terrax, but also Ben Grimm's cosmic energy as well, turning him back into a regular human, but also knocking him out and Thor out as well. Just like that in a matter of seconds. That's not even the rough part. The rough part is that you have Black Panther and also Ben Grimm be killed off by Terrax in a matter of seconds. Now things get even worse because you didn't have Terrax say like, oh, humans, you're wrong. You see, you thought there were only 3 components that were placed across the Earth. There was a 4th one. There is another Herald of Galactus, and that would be Airwalker. Now you do have Terrax say, you know what, it's now time for me to kill off the rest of the heroes. But you do have the Silver Surfer try to step in and stop Terrax. And this leads into the final moments of this storyline, the final moments of the Earth. Yes, you heard that right, because when it comes to our heroes, they're trying to regroup, but you didn't have Dr. Doom arrive. Now for Dr. Doom, he's still trying his best to absorb the energy of somewhat cosmic powers. So of course, he goes over to Galactus, and Galactus sends him flying the other direction in like a matter of seconds. The problem is that it distracts Reed long enough to allow Galactus the ability to turn on his machine. And so just like that, the entire Earth was just consumed by Galactus. Now, at the very last second, you have Dr. Doom go back in time. But the book ends on that note. Man, oh man, oh man. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into more Heroes Reunited. And we do pick up with part 2. Now, guys, just in case you're kind of wondering, like, why in the world I'm doing like 4 different videos for Heroes Reunited is because each issue is like 40 to 45 pages long. So it's pretty long enough for us to do a video for each one of these. But also kind of gives me a small break when it comes to recording all these different storylines that I do in a short period of time. But anyways, getting back into Heroes Reborn Part 2. As you all know, at the ending of Part 1, we saw that Galactus was able to destroy the Earth. Like, he consumed it. So it's kind of like the heroes are officially dead, right? But now we have to dive into Avengers issue number 12, part 2 of the storyline. And matter of fact, as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we pick up in the past. We pick up the Avengers right now giving the fake Thor a funeral. As you all know, when it came to Heroes Reborn, it was our heroes in the main Marvel universe transported into a brand new reality, but reborn in that brand new reality, except for Thor. For some strange reason, most likely because he's a god, when it came to Thor, he was not reborn in the Heroes Reborn reality. There was a fake Thor at first, and so we were kind of left to believe it was our original Thor, but it wasn't. And then out of nowhere, our Thor appeared in this reality. Now, the fake Thor died in a big battle against Loki. So right now, it's our hero saying goodbye to the fake Thor for once and for all. But right after you have our heroes get done with the funeral, well, that is when you have Nick Fury get a call from one of his agents. Now, this guy is warning the Avengers, warning Nick like, hey, Galactus is coming. His heralds, they're killers. And matter of fact, they trashed my warp drive. Like, I'm gonna die as soon as I arrive back on Earth. But I want to tell you right now, y'all gotta get ready for Galactus. But the thing is, right after that message, that agent, his spacecraft, it flies right through the helicarrier into the Earth. Now, of course, the helicarrier did survive, but now as our heroes kind of wondering like, what the heck is Galactus? Because right now, this storyline is in the past. But right after that, you did have our heroes be confronted by Doctor Doom. Now, this is Doctor Doom from the future, from part 1. Because remember, at the end of part 1, Galactus was able to consume the Earth. But Doctor Doom was able to time travel back in time. And so now all we're seeing is Doctor Doom trying to warn the Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, what's about to come. Here comes Galactus. He says, listen, what you have to do is get all types of missiles ready and use those missiles to hopefully kill off the Heralds. But also the Heralds, they're bringing devices to plant into the Earth. You must go out of your way to destroy the devices before they're able to be planted into the actual Earth. And then you have Doctor Doom leave. Now, for our heroes, they believe Doctor Doom, but mainly because, well, one of Nick's S.H.I.E.L.D. agents just crashed back on Earth and said Galactus is on his way. And so because of that, bam, Nick is on the game. Now for Doctor Doom, he knows the Heralds have to go. They're really powerful. And so for Doctor Doom, what he's going to do is use missiles as a way to kill off the Heralds. He also knows the Avengers are the Fantastic Four. They will try their best to fight against the Heralds. And so for Doctor Doom, what he wants to do is use the missiles to kill off the Heralds, and most likely it'll kill off the heroes as well. And honestly, for Doctor Doom, that'll be okay. And the reason why, because then everyone will be out of his way to allow him to rule over the Earth. And for Nick Fury, this man is already on the game plan when it comes to figuring out how to stop Galactus. He says, hey guys, listen, we got 3 locations where the Heralds might appear with their devices. And so what he did was, he already called up 3 different teams to handle these problems. The Fantastic Four, they're going to one location. The Avengers, a different location. The Hulk, the 3rd location. Now the Wasp and also Hank Pym, they stay behind because for Hank Pym, he has to show Wanda something very important. And that would be the Vision. And we do learn here that this is a new body that Hank Pym had created for the Vision. But also, when it came to Hank Pym, when he was inside the body of the Vision in the earlier storyline, you had Hank pull out a special chip. That special chip held all the memories of the Vision in that one single chip. So, of course, when you have Hank plug that chip in the new body of the Vision, he remembers everything from the past. So now our heroes have another Avenger on their side to help out with this situation. But now we have to switch over to the Fantastic Four. Now, when they arrive in Moscow, they find the first Herald of Galactus. And of course, it would be the Silver Surfer, who's right now trying to plant the device into the Earth. Here's the thing, because for our heroes, they say the Silver Surfer in a previous storyline. But also, let's not forget, in the last chapter, when it came to the Silver Surfer, he had a change of heart when it came to the idea of Galactus trying to consume the Earth. But in this chapter, he's kind of like, hey, listen, I gotta do what my master tells me to do, which means if I have to fight against you guys, I will fight against you guys to allow Galactus to consume your planet. But let's not forget that Doctor Doom is watching this battle. And so for Doctor Doom, he's kind of like, cool, this is perfect because now I'm going to use some of my missiles to hopefully get rid of the Silver Surfer, but also his device. But at the same time, I can kill off the Fantastic Four all in one single blow. But getting back over to the battle with our heroes, they're still fighting against the Silver Surfer. But here's the thing, because you do have Reed Richards. Man, this dude got a plan like always. You see, for Reed, he brought this device that allows him the ability to absorb energy and then give that energy over to somebody else. Like, for example, cosmic energy. He absorbed the energy of the Silver Surfer and gave that energy over to Johnny Storm, making Johnny even stronger than he was earlier, but allowing Johnny the ability to go ahead and get rid of the device that was planted by the Silver Surfer. Now, here's the thing, because even though our heroes are now believing the idea that they have begun the process of saving the Earth, you have Reed and the Silver Surfer realize what's about to happen. The missiles are about to drop. The ones that Doctor Doom had fired. And for Susan, she's too weak right now to even try to put up a force field. And so just like that, that entire area got blown up. The Fantastic Four are dead. Now, the Silver Surfer survived. And Doctor Doom, he realized that his plan did not work on that one Herald right there. Now we do switch over to the Hulk because the Hulk's right now on his way over to one of the 3 locations out there. Now for the Hulk, he does get some backup. That will be the Vision and also the Scarlet Witch as well. Now we had to switch over to LA, and the reason why, because you have S.H.I.E.L.D. fighting against the 3rd Herald, and that would be Plasma. Now for Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., they're trying their best to do whatever they can to stop her, but the problem is that she's just too strong. And matter of fact, Nick gets hit by one of her attacks, and so it does seem like he's going to die. And so just like in the last chapter, you have Nick take the helicarrier and crash it right into Plasma. And the reason why, because the reactor core in the helicarrier is strong enough to, well, kill her off. And so just like that, there goes Plasma off the board. Now, as we do switch over to the 3rd location, the Hulk again, and also Vision, you have the 2 characters fighting against Firelord. Now, technically, Firelord is really able to take the Hulk on, but it's the whole idea of the Hulk and Vision working together to kind of keep Firelord distracted long enough to allow the Vision to grab Firelord's staff and use the staff cosmic power as a way to get rid of the 3rd device. And so just like that, you have our heroes being able to win this battle, it seems like. But once you have the Hulk turn back into Bruce Banner, we get the idea that Firelord attack did some serious damage to the Hulk, and Bruce is on the verge of death. But it's also Bruce realizing that what the heroes are trying to do right now is not going to allow them to win the battle against Galactus, really. But now we have to switch over to the Avengers. Now, when we do, it's really more of us seeing the Avengers fighting against Terrax. Now, for Terrax, he kills off Hawkeye very quick and easy. And I feel kind of bad because I am a Hawkeye fan, but at the same time, like, it's Hawkeye going up against Terrax. Like, it's not a fair battle at all. But either way, you do have the rest of the Avengers trying their best to get rid of Terrax, but also a device that he brought with him as well. Now, for Wasp, she also dies in the middle of the battle as well. And Thor does get hurt by Terrax pretty badly as well too. But you have Thor use his hammer to send Terrax right into the actual device, blowing it up, killing off Terrax. But also, again, it's our heroes believing that they are beginning the process of saving the world against Galactus. Now, for the Silver Surfer, he watched Plasma die, but he also watched Terrax die as well. Now, for Doctor Doom, he wanted to use another set of missiles, but the problem is that those missiles came from Russia. And the problem is that those missiles that he tried to use, they didn't shoot off correctly. They blew up while still being docked. And so, unfortunately, half of Russia just got blown up just like that. Now, when Galactus does arrive into New York City, he's confronted by what's technically left of the Avengers, Thor, Iron Man, and good old Captain America. But the problem is that you have our heroes find out that there is another Herald, and that will be Airwalker. But on top of that as well, when it comes to this Herald, he has another device. And matter of fact, more devices are being planted across the world to begin the process of allowing Galactus to consume the Earth. And for the Avengers, they got blasted pretty hard by Airwalker. So unfortunately, they have to retreat back over to Avengers Mansion. Now, once you do have the Avengers get back over to Avengers Mansion, they're then confronted by Vision, Scarlet Witch, Bruce Banner, Hank Pym, and Doctor Doom. Now, for Bruce Banner, the man got a plan. He said, hey, listen, we can't stop Galactus. The Earth is going to die, but let's go out with a bang. Let's go ahead and get rid of Galactus as well. And so what Bruce is saying is use the Gamma Core over at Avengers Island. Because remember, in an earlier storyline, when it came to the Gamma Core, it was kind of like this hole in space and time, pulling in different characters from different realities or different points in time. And so for our heroes, they believe if they go out of their way to destroy the Gamma Core, it should kill off the Earth, but also kill off Galactus as well. Now for Doctor Doom, he does not go with them at all because the Doctor Doom, what they're trying to do is completely crazy. And so for Doctor Doom, he leaves to once again try to time travel. Now, for the heroes, they go over to Avengers Island, except when they do arrive at Avengers Island, you have our heroes go over to the Gamma Core. When they do, they're then confronted by the Silver Surfer. Now, for our heroes, they're kind of confused right now because they know that this man is a herald of Galactus, but it's him saying like, I've been watching you guys and I realized something, that I learned something from you guys. The idea of compassion, the idea of hope, the sorrow. Like I learned that basically this is completely wrong. And now I want to help you guys to save not this world because this world is going to die, but at least stop Galactus to save other worlds out there in the universe. And so you had a Surfer being able to heal up Thor. Once he does that, you have our heroes attack all together, and that destroys the Gamma Core, ripping a hole in space and time. With that happening, of course, that means the Earth is gone just like that. Galactus gone just like that. Once again, the Earth has been destroyed in this storyline. The only thing left out there floating is Thor's hammer. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over Heroes Reunited, we do pick up with part 3, and part 3 takes place in Iron Man issue number 12 in the Heroes Reborn reality. Now, just in case you're kind of like getting into our coverage over Heroes Reunited, it's a whole storyline that took place in the Heroes Reborn reality. You know, the reality where in late 1990s, you had a few characters that were no longer selling books, and so when it came to Marvel Comics, they pushed those characters into a brand new reality to kind of give them a fresh start over. There were some old creators that were still popular in the 1990s, kind of hoping it would bring life back into those characters. And so when it came to Heroes Reborn, every like 6th issue, they would have a crossover. And this was the second one, better known as Heroes Reunited, where Galactus is trying to consume the Earth. And every single time the heroes try their best to stop Galactus, they fail. But every single time they do fail, it's Doctor Doom going back in time with what he learned to hopefully figure out, like, how can they save the world? How can they stop Galactus? And matter of fact, when it came to our first video over Heroes Reunited, it was Doctor Doom being confronted by a future version of himself. And that right there kicked off what to me calls a time loop. Like, it's just Doctor Doom constantly going back in time over and over again until he is able to find a way to stop Galactus. Now, for me personally, I kind of like this chapter a tad bit, and the reason why, because it brings in characters we did not see in the first two chapters, and that would be She-Hulk and Doc Samson, because in our last Iron Man video, you had Tony and Reed be confronted by the Hulkbusters, because in our last video, we had talked about the idea that our three Hulk characters are somewhat being affected by the gamma virus in their bodies. And so when it came to Bruce and Doc Samson, they kind of believe a blood transfusion could possibly help them, but Bruce turned to Hulk, so he began to freak out. You had She-Hulk step in. Of course, that led to her becoming the She-Hulk in this reality. Either way, for these three characters, they're right now the Hulkbusters in the Heroes Reborn reality. Now, this kind of brings up a conversation for Reed and Tony. Because for Reed and Tony, they kind of realize there's something off about this reality. And for me personally, this is a callback to our earlier videos where you had Reed and Tony kind of being able to get small glimpses of the main Marvel universe, but not getting the idea that they're from that universe, but they were pushed into a different reality. And so for Reed and Tony, they have been trying their best to figure out what's going on with their reality, because again, they all got powers. And it's really weird how one particular friend group is able to get powers, every single member of that friend group. But you did have our heroes be alerted about Galactus and his heralds coming to, well, the planet Earth. Now, when it comes to Tony, in our last video, him and Doctor Doom, they had time traveled. And while time traveling, they saw the spacecraft. And so for Tony, he definitely knows about that spacecraft. He definitely knows there's something special about it. But you do have Reed Richards be the first one to try to make contact with the Heralds of Galactus. And he tells Tony in the Hulkbusters, like, you guys are technically the backup team. Like, if things pop off, y'all come in then. Now, when it comes to Tony, one of the things I do want to point out that in the first issue of this series, we had technically learned that he was heartless, that he was emotionless. And the reason why, because, well, he watched one of his close friends die while testing out an armor that him and his best friend had created. But over time, with him being Iron Man, he has turned into this person who can show that he does have emotions, that he does have a heart. And so for Doc Samson, he's kind of happy about the idea of seeing Tony like that. But you didn't have Tony get a call about something else. So of course he has to leave. Now for the Hulkbusters, they believe it's actual business, but in reality it's something, well, personal. Because in the earlier video, we had saw that Happy Hogan got like seriously injured. Now, in an earlier video, I kind of had mentioned that Happy Hogan had died, but that's not the actual case there. You see, Happy Hogan survived. And the thing was, in the artwork in that last video I recorded, I really thought Happy Hogan died, but that's my fault. But in reality, he did survive. So it's Tony right now, seeing how Happy he is at the hospital. But while you have Tony, Pepper, and Happy just hanging out at the hospital, you have Doctor Doom arrive. Now, when Doctor Doom does arrive, this is Doctor Doom once again trying to save the world by going back in time with the information that he remembers from his last few attempts. And so it's him saying, okay, you know what, Tony, we gotta go. He grabs Tony and they leave. And he makes sure to grab Tony's Iron Man suit as well. Now we do switch over to the Hulkbusters, and they're watching the Fantastic Four fight against the Heralds of Galactus. Now, while they're doing that, I kind of find this a tad bit funny, and the reason why, because in the earlier chapters of the storyline, we saw the Heralds of Galactus take on teams of heroes by themselves, and to see Fantastic Four go one-on-one with these guys is pretty wild to me. I feel like they should be dead by now. But either way, we switch over to Bruce Banner, who's being confronted by Liz. Now, Liz was head of security for Tony Stark's company, but the thing is, when it came to Bruce Banner getting hit with gamma radiation, turning him into, well, the Hulk, for her, it gave her radiation poisoning. She's dying. And so it's her saying goodbye to Bruce Banner. Now, when it comes to Doctor Doom and Tony Stark, they're having this conversation where it's Doctor Doom wanting Tony Stark to understand about what happened in the last video we covered. The whole idea of the two characters going throughout time, but in the main Marvel universe. And so it's Doctor Doom saying, like, Tony, you have to realize something, that there's something off about us, about this reality. But it's also Doctor Doom beginning to remember his original past over from the main Marvel universe. Because it's Doctor Doom saying, think back to a year ago. But for him, a year ago was the Onslaught crossover. The whole idea of our heroes fighting against Onslaught and our heroes going into him and being transported over to the Heroes Reborn reality. Now for Tony Stark, he can't believe what he's hearing from Doctor Doom, but it's Doctor Doom saying, like, no, when it came to Onslaught, you grabbed me and pulled me into him, into this reality. It's Doctor Doom beginning to remember, but unfortunately, their conversation ends because you have Nick Fury say, hey guys, listen, I need all hands on deck, so y'all guys are coming over to the helicarrier. And this is more of Nick Fury telling the Avengers, like, hey, listen, so the Fantastic Four, they're dead. Like, they died fighting against the Heralds of Galactus. So, like, it's up to y'all to fight against them, but to also fight against their boss Galactus when he arrives. Now, once you have Doctor Doom hears that Reed Richards had died again, that's now twice that Reed Richards had died. It's Doctor Doom saying, like, okay, so, like, I need to work with the Avengers, work with my old colleagues from college like Hank Pym and Tony Stark to find a way to hopefully defeat Galactus and save this world. And so it's now our heroes beginning to move out with their plan. You have all the hard hitters fight against the Heralds of Galactus, while you have all the smart ones stay behind to hopefully make something to save the world. Now, the next few pages for me kind of shows the timeline being changed, because in this timeline, you have our heroes being able to take on the Heralds of Galactus and being able to kill them off. But this time, because they worked as a team, unlike the Fantastic Four, who did one-on-one battles. And so you do have our heroes being able to kill off the different Heralds of Galactus. And so this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline, right? Where we get to that point where it's the heroes using a device that was created by Tony, Hank, Bruce, and also Victor, the ultimate nullifier. And they're kind of hoping it will work against Galactus. The problem is you have Galactus just go ahead and get rid of that device in a matter of seconds. So just like that, our heroes had failed. And so with our heroes failing, it's Doctor Doom realizing he has to go back in time once again to hopefully find a way to stop Galactus. And this leads into the final chapter of Heroes Reunited. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Heroes Reunited. And with that being said, we do pick up the final chapter of this crossover that took place in Captain America issue number 12. Now remember, this storyline does take place over in the Heroes Reborn reality for Marvel Comics. Now, as we all know, that came out of the whole idea of Onslaught, where you had our heroes go into Onslaught, would be transported into a different reality because in the late 1990s, some properties of Marvel Comics were no longer selling. And so they had a great idea to push those characters away in a different reality and give old creators a chance to kind of give those characters a fresh start in a brand new reality, and hoping that it would bring fans back into Marvel Comics for those characters like Iron Man, the Avengers, and Fantastic Four. Anyway, so Heroes Reunited, it's really more about the idea of our heroes trying the best to defeat Galactus. And technically, it's really more about Doctor Doom trying his best to defeat Galactus. And let me explain. You see, when it came to the very beginning of Heroes Reunited, you had Galactus arrive to Earth. When he did, things popped off very quickly, but the Earth was consumed by Galactus. What you've been seen in the earlier chapters is Doctor Doom going back in time every single time he failed to stop Galactus. So now this is his fourth and final attempt. And the reason why it's his fourth and final attempt, because at the end of the last chapter for Doctor Doom, his device that allows him to time travel got damaged. So unfortunately for Doom, he has to get it right here to basically stop Galactus, but to save the world. And so as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we really do pick up with Rebecca Barnes. Now, Rebecca Barnes is the Bucky of this reality, the Bucky of the 1990s for this reality. Now, here's the thing, because when it comes to Rebecca Barnes, there's so much about this character that comes out later on in later books down the road when it comes to Marvel Comics. So like, she's a very intriguing character for the overall idea of Heroes Reborn. And you see what I mean if we ever come back to this reality. But for Rebecca Barnes, when she does get home, she's confronted by Doctor Doom. Now, for me personally, I would freak out as well. But the reason why you have Doctor Doom there for, you see, for Doctor Doom, he was able to access the SHIELD files. And with him doing that, he learned that Rebecca is technically a chronal anomaly. She should not exist at all. And that right there continues the whole idea that Doctor Doom is slowly realizing that there's something off about this reality. The possibility that this reality should not even exist at all. And that right there is pretty important. But either way, for Doctor Doom, he feels like he should go ahead and just kill her off because, again, she should not even exist at all when it comes to this reality. But you did have Steve Rogers appear. Now, when Steve Rogers does appear, you have both characters just stop in their track. It is not like Doctor Doom and Steve are going to fight. And it's not like Doctor Doom is scared of Steve Rogers. It's more of like, for me personally, it's Doctor Doom remembering that what he's here for. Like, the dude traveled back in time to find a way to stop Galactus. So why should he waste time on Rebecca Barnes when technically he should be focused on finding a way to defeat Galactus? So it's him saying, like, you know what? Let me go ahead and get the heroes together to fight against Galactus. Now, here's the thing, because for Doctor Doom, he also drops the hint for Steve Rogers that he is somehow connected to SHIELD. Now, we did learn in the earlier chapters that when it comes to SHIELD, they do work with Tony Stark, but they also work with Doctor Doom as well. And so you then have Doctor Doom begin the process of trying to bring together the heroes of this reality. And the thing is, it's Doctor Doom also realizing that he needs Reed Richards. And for me personally, that is pretty big for Doctor Doom, because for Doom, he realized he needs the help of other scientists like Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, Reed Richards, Hank Pym, to find a way to defeat Galactus. But here's the thing though, because in the earlier chapters, we always saw Fantastic Four die first. And so when it comes to Doctor Doom, he knows that the Heralds of Galactus will fight against Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four will die, and that will hurt their chances to finding a way to defeat Galactus. So you had Doom get the Avengers, they go out there, protect the Fantastic Four, defeat the Heralds of Galactus, and now you have our heroes being able to begin the process of working together to find a way to stop Galactus. Now, for Galactus, he knows that his heralds have basically failed on Earth. Now, when it comes to Galactus, he has 5 heralds, so only 4 of them have failed. Terrax, Firelord, Plasma, and Airwalker. But the Silver Surfer is still around. And the thing is, he's hoping the Silver Surfer will still be able to finish the job, to get the Earth ready for Galactus to consume. Now, for the Silver Surfer, we saw in earlier videos that he kind of hates the idea of Earth being consumed by Galactus because the Fantastic Four has saved him. And so he's beginning to grow when it comes to having emotions. But either way, you do have Galactus order Surfer to go get the Earth ready for consumption. But now we have to shift over to the Knights of the Atomic Round Table. Now, that name was given to that group back in college. And really, everyone involved in that group were basically scientists in some types of ways. Like, for example, you got Tony Stark, you got Hank Pym, Dr. Doom, Bruce Banner, Reed Richards. There was one more character known as Rebel, but he officially died by this point in the Heroes Reborn reality. But all of these characters met back in college, and now it's all of them coming together to figure out how to get rid of Galactus. And the thing is, Bruce Banner has an idea. He's kind of like, hey, let's give Galactus exactly what he wants. And you have everyone freak out like, whoa, what in the world did Bruce Banner just say right now? But now we have to shift back over to Rebecca Barnes. Now, for Rebecca Barnes, it's really more of her at Avengers Mansion alongside with the other heroes. But on her mind at the moment is the whole idea of what Dr. Doom had told her. Like, hey, you should not exist. And so for Rebecca, she wants to know, what does that truly mean? Like, is there a possibility that she should not be around at all when it comes to being in this reality? But you didn't have her be confronted by the Silver Surfer. Now, for the Silver Surfer, even though he's still working for Galactus, he still wants to find a way to help out the humans. And so you had the Silver Surfer tell Rebecca, hey, listen, I have a message. And you need to get this message over to the heroes that Galactus is coming. And when he does arrive, your Earth is going to be consumed. And I'm telling y'all this right now so that you may be able to use your science to find a way off this planet, to take a few people somewhere else, to restart humanity somewhere else. Now, of course, Rebecca, she believes in the heroes. They're going to find a way to stop Galactus, to save this Earth. But for the Silver Surfer, he only came here to give her a message to give over to the other heroes. Now, while he does try to leave, you have her grab onto his board. Now, Steve Rogers sees that she has, of course, grabbed onto the Silver Surfer's board. And this leads into a very sad moment because while you do have Rebecca holding on to the surfer board, you didn't have Galactus appear. When he does appear, you have Galactus hit her with some kind of cosmic energy, having her fall into a body of water. Now, luckily, Steve was around, but for the Silver Surfer, he's kind of like, what did I do? Like, what have my actions brought? Like, if I only came here and did the job that Galactus had asked me to do, there's a possibility that little girl would not got hit by my master's cosmic blast. So you did have Steve Rogers bring her back over to Avengers Mansion. Now, with him doing that, of course, you have all the Avengers, all the heroes seeing what happened to her. And of course, that motivates them even more to find a way to bring down Galactus. Now, right after that, you didn't have the heroes get one more person on their side, and that would be the Silver Surfer. He's no longer working for Galactus. He will now help the heroes to find a way to bring down his old master. And so you have our heroes give the Silver Surfer the ultimate nullifier. Now, here's the thing, because if anybody ever used this device, you're going to die. It's a major sacrifice that technically has to be done as a way to get rid of Galactus. And so for the Silver Surfer, he agrees to be the one to sacrifice his life to save this planet. And so with the ultimate nullifier, what it's going to do is absorb the energy of our heroes, but also the energy of Galactus, and then continue to feed Galactus until technically he overloads. And so that is their actual plan to defeat Galactus once and for all. And it does really work out for our heroes where Galactus is truly defeated. Now, with Galactus being gone, you didn't have our heroes go their separate ways, right? Now, for Reed Richards, is him kind of hoping that Doctor Doom will go ahead and switch sides. Like Doctor Doom will try to reopen the doors that he had locked away in his heart and allow the different people that he made friends with back in college be back in his life once again. But of course, for Doctor Doom, he can't do that. But to go ahead and get into the ending of the storyline, we do switch over to Steve Rogers, right? And so for Steve Rogers, he's currently at the grave at Abraham Wilson. Now, Abraham Wilson was the father to Sam Wilson, who died trying to give Steve back his shield. But you didn't have Steve be confronted by Richard Barnes and Peggy Carter. Now, of course, as we know, Steve should know these characters very well. But the thing is, Steve does not remember them. And this kind of leads into the idea of them, or they were going to, try to give us another origin story for Steve Rogers in this reality. But unfortunately, when it came to Heroes Reborn, it got canceled, and you did have our heroes go back into the main Marvel universe, restoring the original origin of Steve Rogers. But the reason why I'm saying all of this because for Steve, being confronted by Bucky and also Peggy and not knowing them, you didn't have Nick Fury appear. And for Nick Fury, he says, listen, we can't tell you how you know them or when you met them. But it's also Nick Fury saying, like, by the way, what you were told, the whole idea of Truman. Because remember, in the very first story arc for Steve Rogers in this reality, we had learned that he wasn't frozen in time. That technically what happened was, for Steve Rogers, he had a disagreement with the president after World War II because they had dropped the bombs in Japan. And he hated the idea of them doing that. And so what Nick Fury did was he used technology back then to control the mind of Steve Rogers to make him live different lives throughout the years leading into the 1990s. And so here we are now. It's Nick saying, like, there's a possibility none of that happened, which means how in the world did Steve survive from World War II up to until now? Like, what happened between these 2 points in time? But the thing is, we don't get the chance to learn it here. Okay, so it's time for us to finally wrap up our coverage over the Heroes Reborn reality. As y'all know, when it came to Marvel Comics in the late 1990s, what they did was they basically tried to give some certain characters a fresh start. You see, in the late 1990s, as we all know, Marvel was struggling and some of their properties were no longer selling. Iron Man, Avengers, Fantastic Four. When it came to Captain America, he was technically selling, but he was also part of that package deal as well. But either way, when it came to Marvel, what they did was they had used Avengers X-Men Onslaught event as a way to push those characters out of the main Marvel universe, but into a different reality, better known as Heroes Reborn, to give those characters a fresh start with old creators that Marvel had brought back. Now, at first, it did seem like everything was going to work out for them, but by the 12th and 13th issue of each series, you didn't have Marvel say, you know what? Let's go ahead and take those heroes back over to the main Marvel universe. Now, after reading everything about Heroes Reborn, I can officially say that I don't really hate it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I felt like it was just okay. For me, the artwork was mostly okay, except for Rob Liefeld's artwork. But hey, that's not really me hating on him. It's just me saying, like, maybe, just maybe, I don't have a taste for his artwork. And that's really it. But for me, the biggest issue was the overall storyline. Like at first, all the stories were hitting, but then out of nowhere, they kind of felt like the stories were just all over the place, but at the same time, they were trying their best to connect with one another, and it became a huge mess. Now again, that's just me though, but with the idea of Heroes Reborn, The Return, it's nice to see those characters go back into the main Marvel universe. But as we get into the opening pages of Heroes Reborn, The Return, issue number 1, we're really picking up with Reed Richards and Susan Storm. And for me, this makes a lot of sense because these two characters, their son is the reason why they're currently in a different reality at the moment. Because when it came to that Onslaught crossover, you had the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and a few other heroes besides the X-Men and Spider-Man and a few other characters who were, popular at that time, not go into Onslaught. The one who did, they all went into a different reality. And so for the Fantastic Four, they have been living a life in the Heroes Reborn reality like everything is normal. They don't remember their past lives in the main Marvel universe, especially when it comes to their son, Franklin Richards. See, this storyline was the one that established the idea that it was Franklin Richards who had created the Heroes Reborn reality as a way to save his family, but also the other heroes who went into Onslaught to hopefully defeat him. And so to Franklin Richards, he had created the Heroes Reborn reality. The thing is for Franklin, he does not know how to control his abilities. So he did not do it on purpose. It was a complete accident. But for Franklin, he's right now being confronted by Ashima. Now for Ashima, she is this celestial who's right now appearing as a human as a way to communicate with Franklin Richards, to let him know that he does have the ability to bring his family back into this reality, to reach out to them. But the thing is, she also says you have to make a big choice. Now, for this 4-part storyline, that choice is very important when it comes to our heroes coming back into the main Marvel universe. But it's also her kind of hinting at the idea that once he does decide when it comes to that choice, there's a possibility that he might have to leave with her and join the rest of the Celestials. Around this time in Marvel Comics, when it came to Franklin Richards, he was staying with Generation X. Generation X was the 1990s version of the New Mutants, a bunch of kids right now who are trying to learn how to control their abilities, and you had Banshee and also Emma Frost as their teacher. Now, around this time, Marvel Comics, for Franklin, he was classified as a mutant. So for Nathaniel Richards, he decided that his grandson should stay with Generation X. Now, there was a storyline where you had Black Tom attack the school. When he did, you then had Man-Thing being able to grab Franklin and the other members of Generation X. The thing is, for Man-Thing, he saw something going on with Franklin. It's the whole idea that with Man-Thing being like the protector of the nexus of all realities, he kind of saw something special about Franklin and kind of kept him even though the heroes were able to go back home to their school. But now we have to shift over to Spider-Man. Now for Spider-Man, he really does give us that example of a hero who was still popular in the 1990s and was not really affected by the Onslaught event, meaning that he did not go over to the Heroes Reborn reality. He was able to stay in the main Marvel universe. But for Spider-Man, it's him right now watching the news about the anniversary of when the heroes had disappeared. Of course, they're talking about the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, because for the heroes in the main Marvel universe, they believe the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, they had died when it came to going inside Onslaught, not knowing that Franklin Richards had pushed those characters into a different reality. Now, I kind of want to sit down and talk about the Hulk for a moment. And the reason why, because the Hulk is a special character in this whole event. You see, when it came to Bruce Banner and the Hulk, they took down Onslaught. They were really able to beat down on him. Now, the Hulk did pass out. And so you were kind of left to believe at first that the Hulk would not go into the Heroes Reborn reality. But he did. Well, not him. Bruce Banner did. And so you had the Hulk stay behind, but for Bruce Banner, he went into the Heroes Reborn reality where unfortunately he was turned to Hulk all over again in that reality as well. Now we do pick up with this astronomer who's currently just watching this space anomaly make their way over to Earth. Now for this guy, he has no idea what it is just yet, but unfortunately he's not gonna know because when it does crash land, he's killed off. We do learn that it is Ashima arriving to Earth as a human or appearing as a human as a way to be able to communicate with Franklin Richards. But as we do switch over to Franklin Richards, we kind of get the idea of how powerful he truly is. Because for Franklin Richards, he's holding on to this ball. That ball is the Heroes Reborn reality. And when the ball gets eaten by an alligator, you have Franklin use his powers, technically on accident, to kill off the alligator as a way to get his ball back. The Heroes Reborn reality. Now, this ball begins to show him different images, like for example, images of two different Hulks. The Hulk in the Heroes Reborn reality and the Hulk here in the main Marvel universe. And really, we do get a small glimpse in the other world where you do have Thor and also Ben Grimm fighting against that other Hulk at the moment, the one in the Heroes Reborn reality. But while you have that fight going on, you have Franklin being able to see the fight, but only as small images appear on his ball. And he's very confused with the idea of what's exactly happening. But you did have Franklin be confronted by Ashima. Now for Man-Thing, it wants to protect Franklin, but you have Ashima send Man-Thing running away scared, but also on fire as well. But either way, for Ashima, she came there with a purpose. But with Ashima being there in the main Marvel universe talking to Franklin, it begins to affect the Heroes Reborn reality as well, because we do see the Fantastic Four just trying to have lunch together, or really more breakfast. But either way, for Susan, she begins to cry out of nowhere. And it's not like she's sad or anything, just something about her is happening. And that's the idea that the Heroes Reborn reality is about to change forever. Because as we do switch back over to Franklin Richards, who's still with Ashima, it's Ashima right now explaining everything to Franklin like, hey, listen, I'm a Celestial. I'm a very powerful being. Me and my fellow Celestials, we did experiments here on Earth. And of course, it led into you, a creation of a being that has the ability to warp reality, to create life. And that right there is pretty cool and all. But it's also her saying like, let me show you what you did technically on accident. And so she takes Franklin into the Heroes Reborn reality. And with her doing that, it's really more of her saying like, look at what you created. You made this reality. You put your family in this reality. But it's also her saying like, but it has to go. Like, you have an option here. You can say the main Marvel universe Earth, or you can say this Earth that you had created. And so for Franklin, that right there for a young boy is a big thing to ask. Like, you're asking him to decide which world should go. But technically, his family is in the Heroes Reborn reality. And so to close on the first chapter of this storyline, when we do jump over to Reed and Susan, they're laying in bed, but then they're confronted by Franklin Richards. The problem is that they don't remember Franklin at all, really. But for Susan, she kind of does. And here's the reason why, because when our heroes went into the negative zone, they were also able to get like small glimpses of their actual past over in the main Marvel universe. And so for Susan, she's kind of like, I was in this part of the negative zone where I saw myself, a different version of myself that was able to have kids, and they had a son named Franklin, the boy right now that she's currently seeing. And so of course she begins to freak out. But now we have to switch over to Doctor Strange. Now, when we do, it's really more of Doctor Strange being confronted by the fake Loki. And the reason why I say the fake Loki, because when it came to Heroes Reborn, most of our heroes were transported into this brand new reality, given new lives in that new reality. But for Thor and Loki, that was not the case. Now, at first, we were kind of left to believe that it was Thor and Loki from the main Marvel universe who were brought into the Heroes Reborn reality at first. But then out of nowhere, you had the real Thor appear. And the real Loki has been hanging out with Doctor Strange in the main Marvel universe. And so we're kind of left to believe that for Franklin Richards, he wasn't really able at first to transport a god into the Heroes Reborn reality. And so what he did was he created fake copies of Loki and Thor in that reality. And so for this Loki, at first, he still somewhat believes that he is the real Loki. But you have Doctor Strange tell him like, nah, like you are not the real Loki. But while you do have the two characters talking to one another, well, that is when Loki freaks out. And the reason why, because something is coming after Loki in his reality. And that would be Ashima. And the reason why she's there right now killing off the fake Loki is because this fake Loki was, of course, being the god of mischief. He had his own plans, and of course, those plans involved both realities. But for Ashima, she made sure that Loki would not be able to meddle with the plans of the Celestials. But now we're able to work our way over to the Fantastic Four. And when we do, it's all of them right now just looking at Franklin Richards. But the problem is that none of them remember who Franklin is because they were given new lives in this brand new reality. Now, technically for Susan, she somewhat does remember Franklin because she saw him out in the negative zone. She saw that other version of herself, technically her original version. But you do have Franklin try his best to explain everything to the Fantastic Four. The problem is that he does mispronounce Celestials, and so with him doing that, unfortunately for Reed and Sue, they don't truly understand what exactly is going on. But you do have Franklin leave. Now, for Susan, she begs Reed to help out Franklin, to bring home their son. Now we do switch over to Spider-Man. Now for Spider-Man, we're technically going to use him as a way to bring the Hulk back into the picture, but also like the idea of what's happening across the nation. All these different natural disasters just popping up left and right across the nation. And that right there is somewhat important because we're going to see a similar thing happening over in the other reality as well. But now focusing on the Hulk, there's a whole idea that when it comes to the Hulk and him being split with Bruce Banner being in the other reality and also Hulk being in this reality, there's some kind of energy he's putting off at the moment. And really, you have the military stepping in, Hercules stepping in, but also the Thunderbolts. Now, the Thunderbolts were created as a way to kind of, watch over the world with the idea of the Avengers no longer being around. But either way, for the Hulk, it's very concerning because he's putting off some type of energy here at the moment. And while you have the Hulk just popping off in the main Marvel universe, over in the Heroes Reborn reality, the Hulk is once again going on a rampage. And you have you're having Thor trying his best to bring down the Hulk. But then out of nowhere, a bunch of magma just pops right out of the ground. So you have Thor trying his best to protect innocent people. But while doing that, the Heroes Reborn Hulk, Bruce Banner Hulk, just disappears. But while you have that going on for Doctor Strange, he does find Franklin Richards' ball. And with him being able to find the ball, it's now him kind of wondering like, what should he do with it? Should he possibly bring the ball over to the Hulk? And speaking of Franklin Richards, who's still in the Heroes Reborn reality with Ashima, it's her telling Franklin, like, you gotta make a choice here. Like, you got two options. You can go ahead and save the Heroes Reborn reality, or you can possibly save the main Marvel Universe reality. But you gotta make a choice here. And the thing is, for Ashima, the way she talks about the beings in both realities, they're like ants to her. They're kind of like small, lesser beings who she should technically not care about. But for Franklin, they are still people who have lives. They're still alive. And he hates the idea of her looking at them as lesser beings. Now, you do have this wild animal appear. And when it does, for Franklin, he feels bad about the animal. He asks Ashima to help heal the animal, which she does. But then right after that, she kills off the creature. And that right there ticks off Franklin Richards a lot. But it also shows how powerful he truly is, because with him being upset, he was able to release an attack to kind of send her back a tad bit. And for Ashima, she can't believe that his attack actually did hurt her somewhat. But then she realized he had disappeared. But getting back over to the Fantastic Four over in the main Marvel universe, they're also kind of showing us that things are popping off not just on Earth, but also in space as well, because you have two fireballs just making their way over to the Earth. Now, for Susan, Ben, and Reed, really all the heroes on Earth, they just got done with Galactus. So now you are possibly talking about the idea of some more space problems popping up. But you didn't have our heroes realize that earlier for Franklin, he had mispronounced the idea of the word celestials. And so once you have our heroes understand what he meant by it, they're kind of like, okay, we got some work to do here. Now, getting back over to Peter Parker, you have Peter Parker arrive at the scene where the Hulk is at right now, fighting against Hercules, the military, but also fighting against the Thunderbolts as well. Now, when it comes to Spider-Man, when he does arrive there, he realized that the rain has picked up there where the entire area is being flooded. And you have the Hulk trying his best to keep the water away from him. But as soon as you have Spider-Man being able to land right on the Hulk, you have Doctor Strange fly by. When he flies by, he has that ball in his hand. And of course, that means our two heroes, the Hulk and Spider-Man, are easily transported into the Heroes Reborn reality. But while you have the Hulk and also Spider-Man being transported into the Heroes Reborn reality, is also Ashima telling Franklin, like, if he does not choose when it comes to, which Earth to save, the Celestials will choose for him. And if they choose, then both Earths are going to be completely wiped out. Now, when the Hulk and Spider-Man do arrive in the Heroes Reborn reality, they're then confronted by Bruce Banner, who's currently the Hulk at the moment. And so as we do dive into the third chapter of the storyline, we're really picking up with Ashima looking for Franklin, who was able to get away from her. Except when she does find Franklin, he fell down a cliff. And it does seem like that Franklin Richards is officially dead. But now we have to switch back over to the Fantastic Four. Now, when we do, it's really more of us picking up with the Fantastic Four, really more Reed working with Tony Stark. Now, when it came to Reed Richards in this reality, he knew that Tony Stark was Iron Man. The whole idea of Iron Man being Tony Stark's bodyguard, Reed did not fall for it, but it's really now Reed trying to figure out what exactly is going on when it comes to their Earth. And so for Tony, he brought some rock samples from deep inside the Earth to kind of see how old the Earth truly is. Now for Reed Richards and Tony, they can't find anything abnormal about it just yet. But for Tony, he'll be going into the negative zone to run a few more tests on the rock samples. Now, for Reed, he also tells us, the readers, the two fireballs that's heading over to the Heroes Reborn Earth, they sped up. So at first, they may have had a few weeks, but now they only have like a few days before the fireballs do hit the Earth. But now we have to switch back over to the idea of having two Hulks fight against one another. Now, while you do have the two Hulks fighting against one another, you have our Hulk. The one from the main Marvel universe recognized that the other Hulk is Bruce Banner, but in this reality, unfortunately, he had turned to the Hulk once again. Now, for the Hulk, while being in the main Marvel universe, he kind of felt like he was incomplete, that he was missing his other half, but he could not understand why he felt like that. Now he understands why he did, because he didn't have Bruce Banner in his mind with him in the last year. And so now seeing Bruce Banner as the Hulk and kind of realizing what he was supposedly missing is him being happy about the idea of moving on, but also wanting to continue to fight against Bruce Banner, who had hulked out, to see who would technically win, but to also get rid of him. Now, while you do have the two Hulks fall off the bridge and fall into a river, you didn't have Spider-Man be confronted by the Avengers. And really, this is pretty huge because for Spider-Man, he believed that the Avengers were dead. But to see them alive in this other reality, he's kind of like, wait a second, I thought you guys were dead. But as we do switch over to Ashima, it's her right now standing over the dead body of Franklin Richards. Now, you do have the other Celestials tell her, like, you need to bring him back to life. Where, of course, she does go out of her way to bring him back to life. Except when she does that, it's also her now seeing that he is connected to all the different humans on the main Marvel universe Earth. And so when she does touch him, she begins to get a crash course of the whole idea of the human race. And really, it kind of gives her emotions. Like she begins to understand what it feels like to be a human. And so once she does recover Franklin and he wakes up and asks her, like, can I now go see my mom and dad? She says yes. Now, as we do switch back over to the Hulks, you do have something, or really someone out of nowhere in this aircraft grab both Hulks and begin to take them away. Now, before we do learn like what exactly is going on, we have to jump back over to the Fantastic Four because you do have Tony Stark being able to come back from the negative zone. And when he does, the rock samples that he had collected, they basically told him like the Earth is only a year old. And that can't be true because, well, our heroes, they're way older than a year old. And so for our heroes, they begin to freak out. But then they're confronted by Franklin Richards, who has returned to them. Now, as we do switch back over to Spider-Man and also the Avengers and also, well, the Hulks, we do learn it was Dr. Doom who had grabbed the Hulks because it's Reed Richards saying, I need all hands on deck. Like, I need Dr. Doom here, Tony Stark here, Hank Pym here, Bruce Banner. Like, we need all hands on deck to figure out how to save the world. And so for Dr. Doom, him also telling us that when it comes to the Hulks, that they're leaking some sort of transdimensional energy. So of course, it's the whole idea that you have Bruce and Hulk being the same body, but with Bruce going into the other reality and the Hulk staying behind, you now have the Hulk kind of leaking out that energy. Now, for a brief moment, we do switch over to the sidekicks of Captain America. That'd be Falcon and also Bucky. Now, for those two characters just out there right now trying to handle some business out in the streets. The problem is that you didn't have those two characters look up in the sky. They see something. And so to close on the third chapter of the storyline, you do have Fantastic Four, really all the heroes coming together and really more Reed kind of catching everybody up with what Ashima had basically explained to the heroes. But here's the thing, because while you do have our heroes trying their best to figure out like what is their next move, they hear all these screams coming outside from the city. And when you have our heroes look up in the sky, what they see is Celestial, who has now decided what to do when it comes to Franklin's reality that he had created. So as we dive into the final chapter of the storyline, we're really picking up with the idea of our heroes all gathering at the Baxter building, because now it's time for them to go ahead and just head back over to the main Marvel universe by using the vessel that Dr. Doom had used earlier in this storyline. Now, for Dr. Doom, Reed, Tony Stark, and Bruce Banner, they kind of agree on the idea of working together to find a way to save this reality as well, but also still going back over to the main Marvel universe. But now we have to switch over to Captain America. Now, when we do, is him taking Falcon because Falcon is the same one we had back in the main Marvel universe. But of course, he now has to go back home to the main Marvel universe. But for Bucky, she can't go. And the reason why, because she was not from the main Marvel universe. She was created in this reality. And so she does not understand why Steve and also Sam get the chance to leave, but she can't go with them. And the thing is, she has built a friendship with Steve Rogers. As we do switch back over to our heroes, is our heroes now telling Ashima like they don't like the idea of the possibility of this world dying. And so it's them saying like, yeah, we'll go back to the main Marvel universe, but at the same time, we want to make sure that this world sticks around. Now, she says no because, again, the Celestials said Franklin has to choose one of the worlds. He chose this one to get rid of, which means that if you guys try to back out of your word, then that means both worlds are going to be destroyed. Now, it's also her informing the heroes that she does plan on taking Franklin right after they do arrive back in the main Marvel universe. But because you do have all the heroes coming together and they all have different personality, but all have the same purpose, the idea of seeing this world survive, for Ashima, she does change her mind. But at the same time, when she looks at Franklin, that really makes her change her mind, seeing him. Because earlier, while she touched him, she was able to get a crash course on what it's like to be a human. And so for Ashima, she's down with the idea of letting this world survive. But either way, the heroes still must go back home. Now, the question is, where is Tony Stark? And for Tony, he has to say goodbye to Pepper Potts because in this reality, this was not the original Pepper. And technically, we already knew that because, again, she was not there when it came to the big battle against Onslaught. It was Franklin who had created her just for this reality. And so for Tony, it's him saying goodbye, but also him saying like, I love you, but I gotta go. And so this leads into the moment where you do have our heroes begin to make their journey back over to the main Marvel universe. Now we do learn that they have to travel through this reality's version of the negative zone. And the reason why, because there are actual borders to the end of the negative zone. The end borders of the zone is where Franklin Imagination ends. And so once they're able to pass those borders, they'll then be able to go back into the main Marvel universe. Now, for Ashima, she does leave. As a matter of fact, she does get rid of her human form. But while she's leaving, for our heroes, they believe that they're going to make it back there and everything right now is going very smooth. Except that is when Doctor Doom does, well, Doctor Doom things. Because for Doctor Doom, what he wanted to do was siphon off the energy of Franklin Richards. And the reason why? Because then he could use that energy to become a god, to rule over the Heroes Reborn world, but to also go after the Celestials as well. Because he believes with Franklin powers in his, he should be able to bring down the Celestials if he's able to siphon off the energy of Franklin Richards. Now, you do have Thor get in the way. And with Thor getting in the way, you do have those two heroes kind of get lost in the journey where we don't know truthfully where they go to in the storyline. Now, when it comes to Doctor Doom, he does get transported back into the Heroes Reborn reality. And so with that happening, it does lead into another storyline down the road where he does rule over the Heroes Reborn Earth for a brief moment. But this does kind of lead into the ending of Heroes Reborn Return, because once you do have our heroes being able to get back to their reality, you then have our heroes being able to remember everything they had forgotten about when they left the original Marvel universe. Now, for our heroes, they will kind of end up in different parts of the world. Like, for example, I think Steve Rogers does end up in Tokyo or Japan, or somewhere in Japan. But while you do have Bruce Banner arrive back in this reality alongside with the Hulk, you do have the two characters being able to come back together as one. Now, Now, we also learn here that with Ashima basically being able to save both the realities, she did return into her original celestial form. But unfortunately, she's now in this eternal slumber forever. And so, for Bucky and the other people out in the Heroes Reborn reality, they get the chance to see the reality continue on. But for our heroes, they're now back in the main Marvel universe. Now, I'm kind of thinking about the idea of us kind of covering just some stories that took place after Heroes Reborn to kind of see how the heroes try to adjust to the idea of coming back into the main Marvel universe. But with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. See you next time, guys. Later.